The following is a flashback presentation from FLATOBERFEST 2019, the very first FLATOBERFEST. This event took place Sunday, October 20th, 2019, featuring Bob Nodell of Globebusters, Mark Sargent, the creator of the Flat Earth Clues, Joshua Swift of Authentic Intent, and Rob Skiba, our keynote speaker. This presentation is Rob's presentation from that event. The video from this event is not the best, but we do have a very good audio recording and some low quality video to go with it. But I do hope that you will enjoy this presentation because it is Rob Skiba's full-length, uncensored presentation about the Flat Earth. Enjoy. Okay, everybody, we are getting ready to have Rob Skiba start his presentation. Well, while we make sure that everybody who wants to watch this gets in here, it's the first time Rob's been able to do his presentation for a full 3 hours, all slides, all video, uncut, uncensored. And so, people still filing in. Ladies and gentlemen, Rob Skiba.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. All right. You guys enjoying the conference so far? Wonderful. Before we begin, I would kind of like to see what my audience is here. Maybe the easiest thing for me to ask is, how many of you are not familiar with my work? Could you raise your hand? A few people. Okay, so most of you are familiar with my work. Yeah, Karen's right. I was excited that this is the first time I get to actually present a PowerPoint presentation that I put together without having to edit it. Usually when I create PowerPoint presentations, I have what I really want to say, and then I look at my time limit, and I go, hack, 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 hack. So I get like a third of what I would like to present. And then I get the director's cut on YouTube. So my hour-and-a-half conference presentations turn into 4 hours on YouTube. So this time I'm going to hopefully go through the whole presentation uncut and do it within the time limit. Got 120 slides with 52 minutes worth of video throughout them, so got a lot to go through here. For those of you who are familiar with my work, a lot of this is going to be repetitive. You've heard it before. But sometimes I think it's good for us to hear things more than once. I know I like to hear things more than once for it to really sink in. But honestly, I'm really making these presentations for those people who don't know anything about this stuff. It's really for them. A lot of times people will bring their friends and family. They don't have any clue what this is all about. They think you're crazy and all that. So it's for them. So if you'll bear with me on the things that are repetitive, we'll go ahead and get started here. The title of my presentation is Testing the Globe, subtitle, Taking a Disturbing Trip Down the Rabbit Hole, with a focus on a question of origins. And I always tell people, look, don't believe a thing I say, all right? Don't believe me. Just listen, take notes if you want to. Go home and research these things, search and see if these things be true. A little bit about myself, things that influenced my life. Well, my wife is one of the things that influenced my life. She's watching, I think, praying for me back home. So, hi, Sheila. Everybody say hi, Sheila. Hi, Sheila. All right. My parents certainly had a huge influence on my life growing up. My family is very close. I didn't have a picture here with my sister. I have one younger sister. Our family's been very close. I grew up in a Christian family, and my dad was a Baptist minister when I was a kid. And as a result, I was exposed to the Bible from as old as I can remember, from a very young age. And anytime the church doors were open, I was there. I accepted Christ as my Savior at age 7 in 1977, the same year that movie came out. And, those of you who remember that moment when that ship came overhead, whew, that was something else, right? And radically had an impact on my life. I made a public declaration at age 8. I said, I will be an astronaut, an actor, or filmmaker, or dead by the time I'm 30. And I actually made a public declaration, wrote it all out. And it wasn't that I had a death wish. It's just when you're 8 years old, 30 is like ancient history, right? For me, it was like if I didn't achieve those goals by the time I was 30, it would have to be because I was dead. That was my mindset. And Jim Irwin came through town and came to our little Baptist church and signed a picture of him allegedly on the moon, said, "Reach for your dreams, Rob, aim high." And so I'm showing you all this to say, before we get into the rest of this topic, there was no incentive whatsoever for me to even think about wanting to get into this subject, much less travel the world talking about it very publicly. There was nothing in my upbringing that would have prepared me for this. Quite the opposite. In fact, just to prove how much of a Star Trek, Star Wars, sci-fi geek I was, that's a picture of me, 18 years old, like a day before I went to Army boot camp. Look at my bed sheets. Star Wars bed sheets, right? 18 years old. Yeah. Joined the Army to follow my dad's footsteps in many ways, but it was step one in my goals to getting into the space program. I wanted to fly helicopters first because I had learned that supposedly the astronauts had to learn how to fly helicopters before they could fly the lunar landers, and my dad was a helicopter pilot, so I followed in his footsteps. And before I flew them, I figured out, I would want to know how they work first, so I went to helicopter mechanic school first, became a helicopter crew chief / door gunner, and then eventually 2 years after boot camp went through flight school and then flew scout helicopters for the remainder of my time in the military. Soldier of the Year 1991, like rah-rah, Joe Patriot, and hardcore science fiction fan, to the point where even in my 20s, I was going to Star Trek conventions and dressing up no less to do so. Hanging out with the actors from the various TV series. So again, there was nothing in my upbringing that prepared me for this subject. In order to get into the subject, I found very quickly that first, you really have to take the red pill. How many of you know what I'm talking about there? Yeah. If you're still sucking on the blue pill, forget it. There's no way you're going to be able to receive anything that's being spoken about here at this conference. For me, taking the red pill really goes back to about 2006. I was a missionary at that time. I was flying to Kazakhstan, and I was on a flight, 14-hour flight, listening to the guys behind me talk about how 9/11 was an inside job. The whole flight. Now, I didn't say or do anything, but trust me, I was fuming mad. I wanted to go back there and strangle these people. How dare you? Right? I volunteered for Desert Storm 3 times. Before all of this, and then after 9/11 happened, I was like, okay, I was already out. I was like, where do I sign up? I'm going back in. Let's turn the whole Middle East into a glass factory, right? That was sort of our mentality at the time. And so when I got back from that trip, I was like, I was determined to prove those guys wrong, even though I never see them again. And then I stumbled across, I saw Fahrenheit 9/11, which just made me mad. Then I watched Fahrenheit 9/11, which calmed me down, but it didn't answer my questions. And then I eventually stumbled across Loose Change. How many of you guys see Loose Change? Yeah, that was the beginning of my world falling apart, like that I thought I knew. And then eventually I became a published author, had a couple books become Amazon bestsellers. It put me on the speaking circuit, traveling all over the world, talking about various things, and realizing very quickly that we live in a sea of lies about a great many things. And Robbie Davidson says, when it comes to this subject that we're talking about here at this conference, you really kind of got to feel other people out first. Where are they with 9/11? Where are they with the moon landings? If they believe in either one of those things, forget it. Talk about sports, walk away. It's not worth getting into the conversation. They're on blue pill. These are some of the movies that had an impact in my life, the documentaries regarding 9/11. If you haven't seen them, you should check them out. And then a few years later, in the course of my research, for my first book, Babylon Rising, come to find out all of our presidents are related to each other. I was like Joe Hardcore, rock the vote, very politically active kind of guy. I was all behind Ron Paul at the time, and I saw what happened to him. I started questioning things. And then come to find out all of our presidents are not only related to each other, but they're related to one guy, King John Lackland, the signer of the Magna Carta, who also created the Lord Mayor Parade that honors Nephilim giants. How many of you guys are familiar with my Nephilim research? So I'd already done a lot of research on the Nephilim. These are the giants of the ancient world and the gods of antiquity. And this guy, King John Lackland, starts a parade that still takes place in the UK even to this day. And all of our presidents are related to each other and related to him. So then you start thinking, and other characters like Vlad the Impaler and stuff. We're taught that presidents are right, of the people, for the people, by the people, right? Well, what would the statistical odds be that if that was true, that all of our presidents would happen to be related to each other in one guy? I very quickly began to realize this whole thing's rigged. You know, the government, that whole thing, corrupt and just full of lies. And then, of course, you start thinking, what about the Apollo moon landings? Of course, I wanted to be an astronaut. I believed in all that stuff. But then I stumbled across Bart Sibrel's videos there, a funny thing that happened on the way to the moon, and astronauts gone wild. How many of you guys seen these videos? If you haven't, you need to check them out. Another interesting, it's more of a movie made to look like it was actually shot for real during that time. It's a very interesting movie called Operation Avalanche. You guys should check it out. And there's an interesting line in the movie where they're saying they realized they couldn't get to the moon, so they're like, well, we're going to have to fake it. And they're like, well, how are we going to pull this off? You know, how are we going to convince the public? And there's a line in movies like, we don't need to convince everybody. We just need to convince Walter Cronkite. Because if Walter Cronkite is convinced, everybody else will be convinced because they trust him as their source for truth on the news, right? Another website you should check out if you haven't already, it's called aulis.com, AULIS.com. High-level, PhD-level people looking at the Apollo stuff, totally exposing it for the fraud that it is. But if you don't believe any of what I've just said, let's just go ahead and listen to what they have to say out of their own lips. We'll have to have the audio from the computer up if you don't have it already. Listen to this video right here.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
We're also really pushing the boundaries in terms of where we're going forward with exploration. I think humans are naturally driven to do this, and this is really the beginning, I think, of human beings leaving low Earth orbit. I certainly plan on being around to see that.
The plan that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. We only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Once we travel beyond low Earth orbit, the crew will be exposed to larger amounts of radiation. So we have to design both the crew protection systems and our electronic systems to withstand this radiation.
If there is something that definitely, at least in my opinion, exposes the Apollo program as a fraud, it's the Orion project. The Orion project, after they retired the space shuttle, the next project that's on the board right now is called Project Orion. And they're pretty much telling you that Apollo never happened, especially when they put out videos like this talking about the Van Allen radiation belts.
We are headed 3,600 miles above Earth, 15 times higher from the planet than the International Space Station. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation.
What?
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation.
One more time.
An area of dangerous radiation.
Oh. What's wrong with that radiation?
Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back.
That doesn't sound good.
Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back.
The differences of the radiation here on Earth versus out in space, the radiation on Earth is of the waveform. We end up with gamma rays or the electromagnetic spectrum that will be coming off of radioactive materials in the Earth. In space, you actually have the charged particles, which are more damaging, and there are more of them. The flux, or the number of them, is greater, and therefore you'll end up with a higher, what we call a dose of radiation.
One of the most dangerous things for an astronaut in space are what are called solar particle events. The sun has a cycle where it becomes very active, and there are times when it's not very active. And when it's very active, it can spew large chunks of stuff into space called solar storms. And in fact, we're in a time right now as we're speaking when the sun's very active, and you hear in the news about these solar storms. And so a solar storm like that, if spacecraft were in the path of one of these things, could be very harmful to both the humans and the equipment.
We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
What? We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space? I thought this problem was solved over 40 years ago, when he sent a bunch of people in jumpsuits and tin cans through it, there and back a half dozen times. But I forgot, the Apollo guys, they were clueless regarding the radiation belt. It didn't affect them.
I don't know the distance to the Van Allen radiation belt, and if we did, it wasn't a problem. If we were going to encounter it, then we would have had to build the spacecraft and the spacesuit to not give humans a problem. You don't just build something and hope it works. You study to see what the threats are, the environment is, and then you say, how thick do I have to make the metal on the spacecraft so that going through this kind of radiation or these kind of meteoroids, it won't get hurt. And then we build it that way.
We don't have the ultimate answer for radiation on Orion. We're still working on that. If we were to build Orion out of the materials we need, and the sole job was to protect for the radiation environment, the vehicle would really be too heavy. So we have to balance the weight of the materials that we put on the spacecraft with how much protection it's providing the crew. So we're really looking at it from an operational perspective. If we understand a radiation event has happened, the crew will actually take shelter in the aft bay of the vehicle. We have found over the years that water is a really great radiation absorbing material. So we could do things like water that's already there in the water bags for drinking and things like that. That water could be used to shield them. As well as we've had some concepts like a water-filled vest that they could put on should they know there's an event and need to be protected.
We don't have a clue when it comes to how to protect them from radiation. So we're gonna just put them up there in water suits. Yeah, we like water suits, and if we put water all around them, so the radiation could go into the water, and then they could drink it, and it could be like a Fantastic Four. Everybody they'll come back and be mutants when they get back. But we just got some ideas, yeah. But don't worry about it. Yeah, I know there are refugees everywhere, and people are starving and stuff, and we have homeless all over the place. But if we spend a few $1 trillion, I think we should be able to figure out how to make water suits for the astronauts in space, and then maybe it'll work out like it did for the guys in Apollo.
The belts are 1,000 miles to 25,000 miles above the Earth.
We went right out through them.
No effects on your cells?
We didn't even know it. I don't think anybody, well, maybe somebody said you went through the radiation belt, but we didn't feel it inside, and we didn't get any, added radiation.
Yeah, if you pretend that it's not really there, then you can just go right through it.
To protect the astronauts from the Van Allen radiation belts, the lunar module would have required 6 feet of lead shielding. But here's what they really had for protection.
Obviously, the only shielding they had was the literally paper-thin outer hull of aluminum, and their suits consisting of glass fiber, some aluminum fibers, and silicon rubber.
It's very interesting concerning radiation that the astronauts were protected by a thin film of aluminum, when here on Earth they put a lead shield on us when they take a dental X-ray.
In conclusion, when NASA themselves admit to never having left low Earth orbit, and the fact that we don't even have the materials that could withstand the extreme temperatures and cosmic rays in space, how on earth can anyone believe that we ever went to the moon?
Now, as a former NASA fanboy myself, I have to say that was a really hard pill to swallow. But over the last few years, I've become more than convinced that we never went to the moon. And this belief was only further solidified the more I began to analyze the pictures allegedly shot on the moon. I have to say, I don't think they counted on Photoshop. Because you can take these images into image processing software such as Photoshop, adjust the contrast, and see stuff like this. Strange masks and rectangular boxes around the Earth. I even found one on the Apollo 17 mission itself, right here on the NASA website, Scientists on the Moon. Click on this picture right here. Supposedly the same mission, same guys that took the picture of the most famous picture of our Earth. I'm going to do save image as, and let's see, Apollo Moon, let's call it Apollo Moon 17. And I'm going to open that in Photoshop. Okay, I'm going to zoom in on the Earth. I'm going to go to Image, Adjust, Levels, and I'm going to bring the levels up. Uh-oh. Why is there a square box around the Earth allegedly taken from the scientists on the moon in Apollo 17? And people wonder why I don't trust NASA. That's why I don't trust NASA. I mean, they're always out there saying, you know, Rob, everybody's trying to show you stuff from space and you keep rejecting it. This is why I reject it. These guys are liars. So, I mean, if we never went to the moon, then this picture is not real. Since then, they've put out many more what they call blue marble alleged photographs of our Earth. The problem is they're all vastly different. The continent sizes change from year to year, the colors change, there's no consistency. The most famous one of the blue marbles was the one done in 2002. But if you take it into Photoshop and start zooming in on it, you begin to see where clouds were replicated using the clone tool. I mean, even its creator, Rob Simmons, admits it is Photoshop, but it has to be. And when you look into time-lapse videos, it's just as bad, if not worse. Here's the one that got me questioning everything. You can check it out on the JPL website. Supposedly, it was shot from the Galileo space probe back in 1990. Well, I mean, the first thing that caught my attention was none of the clouds are moving. I could take my camera outside, point it up at the sky for an hour, speed it up in my computer, and see the clouds doing all kinds of stuff. But on that day back in 1990, this didn't happen anywhere in the world. And NASA and JPL are bad enough, but the stuff coming from other countries isn't any better. In 2008, this video was put out allegedly shot from a Japanese satellite. Besides looking pathetically amateur, where are all the stars? I mean, look, we get all these images from Hubble, right? Space is full of stars, beautiful colors, nebula, and stuff like that. Every time we watch a sci-fi movie, you know, the planets are hanging there against the backdrop of zillions of stars. But when it comes to any alleged satellite imagery of our Earth, we never see any stars. Even HD footage like this, you can beef up the contrast and look. I mean, HD's got a lot of information. There's no information in this video for stars. I mean, it should look something like this, but it doesn't. Later, I saw this video from 2011. I think it's supposedly from a Russian satellite. And it also allegedly represents a real time lapse of one full day of the Earth. And when I compare this with the one from 1990, both again full day time lapses, the striking difference becomes obvious. I think what we're seeing here is merely the advancement in computer animation technology over the course of about 20 years. And here's an example of that technology. This is 100% CGI and admitted to be such. And then we have what I call the bozo Earth of 2015. And just like back in 1990, once again, the clouds aren't morphing. You can back it up, freeze frame it, go back and forth with it. You'll see the clouds aren't morphing, changing, or anything. They are just following the ball as it rolls around in a time-lapse animation. And don't even get me started on all the problems with this moon. I've got longer videos that deal with that. So if we put them all together, once again, when it comes to time-lapse videos, just like the still imagery, there's no consistency. Over and over and over again, I was finding doctored imagery and or stuff openly identified in the fine print as being a composite image or some form of CGI. The question is, why? Suffice to say, we simply cannot trust imagery from NASA or any other nation's space agency. It's all garbage. And the sad part is it's only going to get worse because computer software just keeps getting better and better and better. For instance, Andrew Kramer from Video Copilot just released this plugin for After Effects.
All right, so there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with this plugin, and you'll be even more amazed when you see how fast and easy it is to use.
So there you go. You just can't trust what's coming. You know, they say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, I mean, if someone continues to believe a proven pathological liar, well, then they're an idiot. So, I'm saying, let's not be idiots here. These people have proven themselves time and time again to be fraudulent. Once you realize the Apollo program was bogus, start looking into the space shuttle program. There's a lot of interesting things about that. And then, of course, start looking into the ISS. And you got to ask yourself, if we know for a fact that they faked stuff in Apollo, and we've got reasonable doubt about some of the space shuttle missions, and more videos coming out exposing the ISS with footage just like this. There's lots of stuff out there. There's some really good YouTubers out there who have been watching these guys like a hawk and pulling down footage like this. These people are lying to us with our money. Tens of millions of dollars a day they're lying to us. So yeah, when you've got so many videos exposing what's going on up there as a fraud, I'm sorry, but the so-called photographic evidence simply is not that compelling, especially if you actually take the time to look into it. Yep, and we in the Flat Earth community have been looking into it, and we have only been helping NASA as a result. How many of you guys remember them doing a photo dump of like 10,000 pictures? I think it was in 2015. You guys remember that? NASA released like 10,000 Apollo pictures, something like that. It was like, take that, Flat Earthers, here you go. Like proof you guys are idiots. We really did go to, well, they did. You can look into this. They actually bought out or rented or something an old McDonald's. They took over this McDonald's building, and there's actual pictures of this place full of NASA reels of video and film in there, and guys on Macs cleaning this stuff up. And meanwhile, those of us in the Flat Earth community are going to the NASA websites, pulling these videos and pictures down, playing with the contrast, looking at things, seeing the masks and stuff like that, doing podcasts, telling about this stuff, like the one I did with Josh Peck showing the boxer on the Earth. I did that live on the air with him. 2 days later, somebody on Facebook goes, yeah, go back to the website. Went back to the NASA website, says, this page has been updated. Download the same video. Magically, there's no box there anymore. Yeah, we totally helped them out. You're welcome, NASA. That was just the tip of the iceberg of what began to make me open to even receiving any of this stuff. Now I'm going to show you, I just showed you what was basically a little nibble on the red pill so far. I'm going to show you what maybe just drink the whole bottle of red pill. This is how I got into this whole thing. I blame these guys. Started with a friend of mine, John Gabrielson, came through town and lives in Austin, came up to Dallas. And every time he's up, we usually go out for dinner or something, hang out for a little bit. And over dinner, he asked me this question. He says, Rob, you ever wonder, how does water bend? I'm like, water doesn't bend. It seeks its own level. What are you talking about? He goes, yeah, think about that the next time you look at a globe in the Pacific Ocean. What? Shut up, eat your burger. I was like, but he planted that seed, right? He planted that seed in me to start thinking a little bit. Then I went to go do my taxes on April 13th. My accountant lived an hour and a half away, so I usually look for a podcast, something to listen to. So I'm listening to Canary Cry Radio, some guys that are friends of mine, and they usually have some pretty cool stuff. And I see the headline, Mark Sargent, Flat Earth Clues. I'm like, oh, what is this? April Fool's joke or something, right? These guys are goofy, so you never know what to expect, right? So I listened, an hour and a half, I listened to this Mark Sargent guy. And of course, I'm rolling my eyes at the beginning. Oh, this is crazy. This is stupid. By the end of the hour and a half, I'm going, shoot, that guy kind of made a little bit of sense. Then I had to go through my taxes, and I had an hour and a half drive back home, so I listened to it again. Well, then I look this guy up. I look up all his videos and stuff like that online. And of course, he puts his contact information at the end of his videos. Yeah, call me. So I call him up. And a couple days later, I have him on my radio show. That was April 15th, 2015, which is the day I now affectionately refer to as the day Mark Sargent ruined my life. Because he certainly did. I had done a whole teaching series, 10-hour teaching series in December of 2014, and the first part of it was all about the globe. Here it is 4 months later, this guy's telling me the place is flat. I'm like, what? So at some point during our conversation, he goes, Rob, I get it. You believe the Earth's a globe. He said, prove it. But prove it without using NASA, the government, or the military as your source. Well, that's where all of the all the videos and pictures we've seen come from the NASA, the government, and the military. So, of course, I didn't listen to him. I went and started looking at all those things, but the more I dug into it, the more I kept seeing things like composite, CGI, artist, rendition. Anything but this is an actual Polaroid of the Earth. I'm like, what? And I start looking into the Bible, and things got real messed up for me at that point. But I started looking on YouTube. There's surely some other stuff out there. Stumbled across this guy's work right here. Eric Dubay had a ton of content online at that time, and he seemed to me like the most articulate person I'd ever heard, certainly on this subject. And he may be a very articulate person, but I quickly realized he was reading from some of these older books. And so through him, I found out about Zetetic Astronomy, Samuel Robotham, 100 Proofs, The Earth's Not a Globe by William Carpenter. And this book right here just really rocked my world, Terra Firma by David Wardlaw Scott, copyright 1901. And started reading those books for myself. Wow. Then, as I keep looking on YouTube, I see this crazy guy out there, Jaron, out there is actually doing tests. And I really felt a kindred spirit in Jaron as I was watching him and listening to him and his skepticism, and he's out there, I'm going to go out there and figure this stuff out for myself. So he's doing this laser test 4 miles across, and his initial ideas didn't work, but then he came up with another idea, and basically they lowered the thing down, I think it was like 6 inches above the ground, and they're seeing it from 4 miles away. And you use globe earther math. This is what's funny about the globe earthers now. They're all telling us the 8 inches per mile squared is not right. It's their math. You go on their websites, metabunk.com, go on their websites. That's the math they're using. And they're like, I thought, that's your math. He's out there using their math and seeing stuff 4 miles away you shouldn't be able to see. I'm like, wow. Then I see this guy claims to be a photorealistic artist, painter, that was a contractor for NASA, and while he was there, heard some things that made him question all this stuff, and he starts asking the question, hey, how do we know this stuff isn't paintings? He knows what he's doing for NASA, right? Well, I'm an artist myself. I've done lots of artwork, and if I really apply myself, I can get really close to photorealism myself. So I really connected with what he was saying, and now just for the sake of consideration, all right, look at these pictures right here. Those top 2 pictures are not photographs. Those are paintings of wine glasses and bottles, okay? The bottom are not sculptures. Those are paintings of sculptures, actually done by a friend of mine. I know that guy. Those are paintings. All those up there are paintings. Now, let's put it in perspective. Which do you think is harder to paint? Right? So I started thinking about what Matt Powerland was saying, and Matt Boylan, I'm going, hey, maybe he's got a case there. And then you start finding videos like this, they just come right out and tell you.
I'm a visualization scientist. I basically try to come up with ways of explaining complex science stories through the visuals and developing artwork and illustrations that actually can help explain the science story to people.
For decades, popular culture and shows like Star Trek inspired a generation of scientists by envisioning what space might look like. But wait, what does space actually look like? Heart nebulas, celestial collisions, a bird's eye view of the Milky Way, astronomers are charting the outer reaches of the cosmos and bringing back jaw-dropping images from telescopes like Hubble and its infrared cousin Spitzer. If you look down at the bottom of that Milky Way image, you'll see these 2 words: artist concept. This sweeping image of the Orion Nebula actually looks like this. And the TRAPPIST-1 star system, the latest discovery of 7 potentially habitable exoplanets that made national headlines, it's really only a box of gray and white pixels. You see, space art is part of NASA, and it has been since before we went to the moon.
We have been totally and completely fooled by artists. Man, and then you start looking at this picture right here, and after you look into the space program and look into the Apollo program, and you realize we didn't really go to the moon, then this picture's a fraud. But that is the most, pardon the pun, the most successful sphere of influence ever put in front of us. We've all seen this picture in our textbooks. I had this picture hanging on a whole wall in my bedroom downstairs, had the surface of the moon with that Earth, which itself was a composite. That wasn't an actual photograph, but it had, supposedly it was the surface of the moon with that Earth right there. I looked at it my whole life. But, as we showed you earlier, they keep putting out all these blue marble images, and they never look the same, right? Which one? And then you start looking into other things that NASA has talked about, and you realize how full of crap they are. And how they had a very early relationship with artists and organizations and people like Walt Disney, with all their cartoons and stuff like that. And of course, if anybody's done any research on Disney and all the phallic symbols and stuff, that actually all those great family-friendly cartoons we all watch are actually full of really bad stuff, Well, it's no surprise then that they put out Earth, pictures of Earth, right? And then you turn it upside down and the clouds spell sex, imagine that, right? And then you come to find out that in 1930, they discovered the planet Pluto, and that's the same year that Disney created the dog Pluto. And then what do you know? Decades later, we get a probe supposedly out there, and it just so happens to have an image of Pluto on Pluto! Man, how crazy amazing is that, right? Wow, Walt Disney, he was a prophet. Yeah, maybe it's just a coincidence, right? And I so appreciate Bob's presentation earlier talking about the inverse square law and distances and stars and all that stuff. Well, right before this, when they showed the picture of Pluto, there was an interesting article that came out that said that they were going to go try to measure and capture the shadow of Pluto going across the Earth. Okay? They're saying that the light from a distant star, and Bob already showed you how ridiculous that whole idea is, but supposedly the light from a distant star was going to line up behind Pluto just right, such that Pluto, from all those however many billions, millions, millions of miles, is going to cast a shadow of Pluto on the Earth, and they're going to go try to capture it and take pictures of it. Think about that, okay? A shadow of Pluto. Like, what about Jupiter and Venus? Much bigger. We should be dodging shadows every day in gym class. Let's go out and dodge Jupiter today. Want to play dodgeball in the backyard. Really? Come on, NASA. And they're telling us how many Earth-like planets did they say that they're finding out there over and over and over again? Which is ridiculous in and of itself until you realize even more how crazy it is when they show you how far away they claim to be looking. Bob talked about it earlier. A light year is like 6 trillion. One light year is like 6 trillion miles away. And they're talking about distances between 4.2 and 2,492 light years away, these Earth-like planets that they claim to be looking at. Okay, that's 2,000 times 6 trillion. And they're claiming that the K2 mission is going to look 20,000 light years. 20,000 times 6 trillion, right? Really, you got a telescope to look that freaking far away? All right, zoom in on the moon right now. I want to count the stars on the flag. Come on, right now. We need to be able to zoom in and see the buggy on Mars that they say that's up there. Oh, they claim to be remote controlling a buggy on Mars. We don't even have a cell phone in the reception in this building. Really? This is what we're being told? Oh, it gets even worse than that. They're telling us that they saw a black freaking hole. How far away? 55 million light years away. They saw a black freaking hole. 55 million times 6 trillion. And most of us believed it. And the people outside these walls do believe it. They just keep testing how far they can push it. And nobody questions anything. Oh, but we're all about Mars, right? We're going to Mars. Oh, and by the way, Mars just so happens to look just like Earth. It's a little more red. But, there it is. Everybody's all about, we got to find life on Mars. Life on Mars. Well, yeah, they found life on Mars. Squirrels. Problem solved. Wow, that's amazing. No, they're up at Devon Island. Jaron was the first person I saw that had figured this out. He went on Google Earth and saw some stuff. You can go look it up for yourself. It's like off the west coast of Greenland, northern Canada, up in that area. Devon Island, they got the little buggies up there, and just so happens to look just like it. It looks just. Oh, by the way, Starfleet's been there already. You see this? This just came out back in June. They found the Star Trek symbol on Mars. Really? The Star Trek symbol on Mars. Not only that, there's a whole bunch of them on Mars. Look at that. Like the whole Starfleet's been there already. No. They're punking you. They're punking me. Look at that, a happy face on Mars. Oh, everybody at NASA was so happy. Look at that. Wow. Oh, but Elon Musk is our guy, right? Elon Musk. How many of you have even heard the name Elon before Elon Musk? I never heard that name before. Well, just so happens that in the 1950s, Werner von Braun wrote a science fiction novel about people setting up a colony on Mars, and their ruler was a guy named Elon in the 1950s. Yeah, probably just a coincidence. But, he put a Tesla in space. Did you hear about that? Yeah, you can tell it's real because it looks so fake.
What was going through your mind? How amazed were you to see your roadster up there with Starman just cruising along with the Blue Planet? And how long will we be getting live views, do you think, from the car?
Well, I think it looks so ridiculous and impossible. And you can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly.
Okay, but now here's something else that's really interesting. Look at this car. Look at the tires, look at the plastic and the leather and other things. Listen to this.
But we didn't really test any of those materials for, is it space hardened or whatever, So it just has the same seats that a normal car has. It's just literally a normal car in space, which I kind of like the absurdity of that.
Yeah, it is quite absurd. Now, I went to the Contact in the Desert conference earlier this year, and this individual here, David Adair, claims to be a materials specialist working for NASA, allegedly testing various materials before they put it on objects that are supposed to be sent out into space. All right, now listen to what he has to say about testing these materials.
In the material sciences, in that environment, it's not friendly out there, y'all. It's 225, 250 degrees below zero on the shadow side, 250 above on the sun side. So right through the meridian line, you got a 500 degree difference. It's a total vacuum. There's ultraviolet rays, gamma rays, infrared, all unfiltered by the atmosphere. Just burns things up when they hit it. Some of our materials just absolutely disintegrated. They were gone. We just had a blank where we put the piece of material.
Okay, so if this guy's testimony is true, then he just completely debunked this. I mean, look at the rubber on the tires. The tires aren't exploding, the rubber's not disintegrating, any plastic on there is not, frying, and it's spinning. So it's going 500 degree temperature range from 250 plus to negative 250 plus as it's in direct sunlight and then, spinning out of direct sunlight. And yet, the glass is fine, the plastic's fine, the rubber's fine, the leather's fine, everything's okay. It's just a regular car that Elon Musk himself said basically just pulled right off the lot and supposedly shot it up into space. So yeah, I agree with Elon. It does look fake, and the whole thing is completely absurd, and I think anybody who believes this is actually real probably needs to have their head examined. Also, did you notice that the orbital speed is usually 17,000 miles per hour, and the Earth's supposedly spinning at 1,000 miles an hour? Did you guys see the Earth spinning? Somebody needs to fire that animator. So I saw another video that caught my attention. This guy was taking a look at the whole idea about going to Mars and really exposes it for the absurdity that whole idea is.
In 1987, construction began on one of the most ambitious scientific experiments in the 20th century. It was called Biosphere 2, a completely self-sustained ecosystem designed to test technologies that we could use to colonize Mars. The idea was to have 8 people live in this compound for 2 years, completely cut off from the outside world, growing their own food, recycling their own waste, and breathing oxygen from a rainforest that they maintain themselves. The project cost over $200 million and over 4 years to build. They brought in 3,800 different species of plants and animals to create a stable environment, including bringing in a specific species of hummingbird that could pollinate the flowers and not smash into the glass walls and kill itself. 4 women and 4 men entered Biosphere 2 in September of 1991 to huge media attention. But only 12 days into the mission, One of the crew people cut her hand while processing rice and had to be taken outside the compound to treat it, already breaking the rules. And when she returned, many people noticed that she was carrying a duffel bag with her filled with unknown items, which breaks even more rules. And only a few months after that, they started to notice carbon dioxide rising to dangerous levels. It turns out that when they provided soil for the plants, they wanted it to grow really well, so they provided very nutrient-rich soil. Well, the bacteria in that soil started releasing a whole bunch of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So they had to bring in CO2 scrubbers, which also broke the rules. And that still didn't quite fix the problem. By January 1993, the oxygen levels were so low it was comparable to a mountain climber at 17,000 feet. So they started bringing in compressed oxygen tanks. At this point, the whole concept of the thing was out the window. And after 2 years of living under constant surveillance, plagued by hunger and the stress of dealing with the same people day in and day out for years at a time, the 8 biospherians emerged from the compound completely splintered into 2 groups, Lord of the Flies style. They refused to even talk to each other. The Biosphere Project went down in the history books as a total disaster. Despite hundreds of millions of dollars and years of planning by some of the brightest minds in the world, showing just how difficult it actually is to create a self-sustaining colony. So the question is, if we can't make that work here on Earth, how exactly are we going to make this work on Mars?
Seriously, now you saw the Orion space capsule in the clips that I showed earlier, right? They're talking about sending like 3 or 4 people, putting 3 or 4 people into a Volkswagen, okay? That's what we're talking about. They're going to put 3 or 4 people into a Volkswagen-sized capsule for 7 months. Think about that. That's how long it's going to take them to get to Mars. Can you imagine spending 7 months in a Volkswagen with somebody? Right? And when they get there, there's going to be no usable water, no food, in a hostile environment, an atmosphere that's not breathable, full of radiation. So obviously they're not going to be able to spend much time there at all. They're not going to be able to bring any of the things that they had in Biosphere with them, you know, and then they're going to have to get back in the Volkswagen for another 7-month journey back. You know what their biggest problem is going to be? Themselves. They're going to go bat crap crazy and kill each other. And God help them if anybody gets a cold. Somebody gets diarrhea, that's going to be a rough 7 months. You know? You ever been in that ride that spins you around, you're plastered against the wall, you know, and the dude over there throws up, and everybody else is like, ah, yeah. 7 months. That's crazy. The whole idea is crazy, but they're going to spend billions, probably trillions of dollars on this idea of going to Mars. Meanwhile, we are destroying this place. We need a class action lawsuit, folks. They're taking billions of our dollars, our tax dollars, for a pipe dream that's never going to happen. Meanwhile, they're destroying our ecosphere here. No, if you're going to spend billions of dollars a year, we need to fix this place first. I'm serious. It's outrageously irresponsible to even consider this whole idea. Oh, but it's in the news every day, going to Mars, going to Mars. Yeah, no, there's a big problem, folks, with that whole idea. So, all of that I just showed you is the preface. That's what primed me to be able to accept the things that we're talking about here at this conference. So I want to talk now about going from being a skeptic to becoming a convert. What does that look like? Well, you know, I dare you to start doing a little bit of research for yourself. If this is brand new to you, you know, there's a saying many of you may have heard before. There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is a proof against all argument, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is condemnation before investigation. Aristotle said it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. King Solomon said, he that answers a matter before he hears it is folly and a shame unto him. How many of you immediately, as soon as you heard flat earth, your first reaction was, that's crazy, that's stupid, this is insane? We were all proving how high the mountain of ignorance we wanted to climb and plant our flag. None of us has done any research. None of us. We heard it and we're like, that's crazy, knee-jerk reaction, right? Well, you know, if you're a reader, I would say, you know, as a Bible-believing Christian, my first place I would point to would be the Bible. And then I would suggest reading those other books that I mentioned earlier, Zetetic Astronomy, 100 Proofs, Terra Firma. And this book right here in the end is a really cool book. It was written in 1920, 22, I think, Kings Dethroned. And it talk, you know, we always hear the sun is, 93 million miles away, and the planets are this far. When you read how they came to those numbers, the methodology that they used to come up with those numbers, now I'm talking sometimes way back in the ancient past, sometimes in the early part of the 20th century, these are the same numbers we're still using today in the 21st century. When you look at the methodology, the way they came to those numbers, you're going to be like, how did any sane person buy that? Highly recommend checking out those books right there. Some of you picked up my book in the back that I had here. I had a few copies. It's also available on Amazon. Basically, what I did is I took many of the scriptures, the biblical argument, and connected them with the full text of Zetetic Astronomy and 100 Proofs and put it into one volume with a little bit of commentary from me. So you can check that out to get yourself started. Now, you need to know this, that every one of us that are now converts, we started out, we're going to debunk this whole flat earth thing. How many of you can relate to that? I'm going to debunk this whole thing. So if that's your mindset, right on. I'm going to go into this conference and debunk the thing. Well, there's a few things you need to understand. Never forget, first of all, that we used to be you. We started out where you are. You know, that's first thing. None of us belongs to the Flat Earth Society. Okay? Now, I know Mark signed up, okay? Mark's here somewhere. He signed up because he wanted to get the little card and see what it was like, you know, but you got to know, none of us woke up one day and said, gee, you know, I wonder what organization I can join today that's guaranteed to make people make fun of me, laugh at me, and cause my life to be a living hell. Where do I sign up? None of us did that. There's this whole mindset that we have to be part of an organization to believe anything, right? That's like saying, oh, you're a Christian, you must be Catholic. No, I grew up Baptist. You know, there's 40,000 denominations of Christianity, right? None of us join the Flat Earth Society, but that's the first thing the media does. That's the first thing most people do is they go check out, well, my friend, my relative, whatever, has gone crazy. He must have joined the Flat Earth Society. Let's see what they believe. The first thing they do is go check that website out. Don't do that. None of us that I know in this research community give them any credibility whatsoever. And we're not part of them. And we don't believe in the upward floating theory of gravity. How many of you have heard that before? The flat earthers believe, watch the screen. This is what they put in the news report over and over and over again. Oh, that's what the flat earthers believe gravity is. No, we don't. We don't believe that. Yet every mainstream news article that's come out has talked about this. All the Christian creationists and stuff, they put this stuff out. We don't believe that. They got that information from the Flat Earth Society. You guys don't know anything more about gravity than we do. One of the answers everybody uses for everything, you try, it's either refraction or gravity, right? How come we can see Chicago? Refraction, gravity, right? Over and over and over again. And yet they claim to know everything about gravity. They don't. Your smartest guys, Neil deGrasse Tyson and these other guys, self-professed smartest people, they say, what is gravity? We don't know. We know what it does. We can predict with it, but we don't know what it is. You know, so nobody really knows what gravity is. Look, we all know you pick something up, drop it. You know, I think it was Dave Murphy called it droppity. Droppity. It works. And you can't just insert flat Earth into the Copernican model of the universe. Many people have talked about this here already at this conference. But that's what people think, right? They think that, you got the sun 93 million miles away. Mercury, Venus, pancake! We don't believe that. Yet Danny Faulkner, how many times has Dr. Danny Faulkner been to our conferences at this creation ministry, Answers Not Found in Genesis? That's what I call it now. He just put out a book called Falling Flat, and on the front cover, he's got a pancake floating in space. He knows that's not what we believe. So he's intentionally being deceptive right off the bat. He's trying to heavily bias his audience against us, when nobody that I know on this entire journey that I've been on believes that. And you have to throw that whole idea out if you're going to enter into this subject, because you can't think that way. You have to just trash the whole thing and start over again. Please do some research into the founding of these organizations, NASA, JPL, the Freemasons, the Nazis. Look into these before you decide they're your source for truth. And I'm begging you, please, for the love of God and everything that is holy, learn what a fisheye lens is and what it does to images. I can't tell you how often I get somebody coming after me literally every day saying, see, proof, there's a globe. And they'll send me pictures like this from remember the Red Bull jump? They'll send me pictures, proof, right there. Well, if you want to, here's a little clue, right? He's jumping over planet New Mexico, for crying out loud. Just complete the curve. That's going to help you. And yet I have friends, or now former friends. This guy's got a PhD, right? He's coming after me. And remember the Mythbusters? They did that little flight in I don't know, it was a U-2 or something like that, plane. They went up to like 70,000 feet, and he was using this as proof that the Earth's a globe. And he's saying, stop listening to the flat Earth gurus and their false claims. And he says, a fisheye lens doesn't curve things that much. I'm like, no, Doug, why do you have the exact same curvature 50 feet off the runway that you have at 70,000 feet? He's like, why deny what is plainly and painfully obvious? I'm like, yeah, indeed. Look at the straight line right behind his head, 70,000 feet, and the GoPro in the window. And yet over and over and over again, people who claim to be smart, letters after their name, physics.org, right? They have websites like this, physics.org, talking about students, got breathtaking, pictures of the curvature of the earth. You would have thought that the curved rope might have given them a little bit of a clue that something's going wrong with this picture here. Or they could have just stopped the video at 4 seconds in and said, hey, scientists proved the curvature of the earth at 10 feet. Because you have the same curvature of the earth at 10 feet that they had at 100,000 feet. It's called a fisheye lens, folks. Check this out. I want to talk about the Gemini 4 spacewalk, June 1965. First of all, I want you to know they've been using fisheye lenses right from the beginning. And here's a proof of it right here from footage supposedly from Gemini 4. Look at, watch. Ooh, going flat. Oh, they cut away. Let's look at it again, though, since they cut away, flat, bulging out to being convex. Look at that globe. Wait. Oh, here it goes, going flat. Anyway, some very interesting things about this footage.
Stood up in the seat and got ready to go, and we cleared him to go, and then he took and pushed off from the seat.
Now notice how fast the Earth is moving below them. And look at the way this is shot. He's all herky-jerky, but the Earth below is moving nice and smooth.
Ed White is flying at 17,000 miles per hour, 200 miles above the Earth.
Okay, I'm out.
Okay, they said they're about 200 miles above the Earth and moving at 17,000 miles per hour, okay? Keep that in mind.
If the lifeline fails, he'll literally be lost in space.
Oh, no.
Today, those pictures are classic.
Yeah, they're classic, all right. Okay, now, when I first saw people doing commentary on this, when he turns his head like that, they're saying, see, that's proof, that this is not right. Then I found this footage right here. So apparently, they can turn their heads, so I guess that's been debunked. But compare the stop-motion animation of King Kong, the original King Kong movie, with this footage of Gemini 4. The background's moving nice and smooth, but in the foreground, it's very herky-jerky, very much like the old stop-motion stuff. So, yeah, I'm going to say that looks fraudulent to me. Now, the International Space Station is also supposedly at about 254 miles high and moves at the same speed. Now, check this out.
This is the cupola. It sticks down below the space station. And a lot of folks, I play this game with myself about where we're flying over the Earth.
Uh-oh. Somebody forgot to speed up the animation. This is the day the Earth stood still, ladies and gentlemen. Compare again the Gemini space footage. Both are supposedly at about 200 miles high and moving at 17,000 plus miles per hour. So somebody's lying here, folks. Either the Gemini footage is fraudulent or the ISS footage is fraudulent. You got to recognize that somebody's lying to you here. Look how fast the Earth is moving in the Gemini, and look how the Earth's not moving on the ISS. And just by way of closing, more proof that they're using a fisheye lens. This is from the same Gemini 4 documentary. Look at that, concave. Oh, no, it's going flat. Oh, no, convex. Oh, wait a minute. No, the Earth's concave. No, it's going flat. Oh, no, it's convex. Oh, concave. Oh, flat. Oh, nope.
During re-entry, the USS Wasp launched 13 search and recovery aircraft.
13.
Gemini 4 splashed down at 12:13 Eastern Standard Time.
12:13.
June 7th, 1965.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, so I may have proved that the helmets can turn. However, if you think about the vacuum of space, what kind of seal could make that possible? Consider that. The whole thing, I'm saying, hey, make a choice. One of them's lying. I think they're both lying, frankly. There's no reason I should believe these people. And you don't have a working map or model either. Kent Hovind's always trying to get somebody to debate him, right? He makes a prerequisite. Everybody's trying to get me to debate Kent Hovind. I have no interest whatsoever in debating Kent Hovind. I'm not going to debate Kent Hovind. But his prerequisite is, okay, if you're going to debate me, you need to send me an accurate map of what you believe first. I'm like, you need to provide us an accurate map of what you believe. You guys believe the Earth's been a globe since Pythagoras, right? 500 BC, whatever, Eratosthenes. You've got 250 different maps, and none of them accurate. He's like, well, that's because you're trying to make a 2D representation of a 3D model. I'm like, that's not my problem. That's your problem, Kent. You believe there's a ball. But if you're going to demand that I give you an accurate map, then you need to give me an accurate map. When it comes to the model of the cosmos, you got Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, hey, we're 96% stupid when it comes to our understanding of the cosmos. And Michio Kaku saying we're off by 10 to 120th power. So until you guys have an accurate map and model, don't be telling us we need to provide you one. We've been at this for, 4 years now? With no money and no resources? They get $50 million a day, and they've had 2,500 years, and they can't give us an accurate map or model. Sorry. And relax, please. Nobody's going to fall off the edge of anything. God's got you covered. It's all good. Most of your top pick a number videos, why we know the Earth is a globe, are very easy to debunk. You see, top 10 reasons why we know the Earth's a globe. Go through them and just put a critical thinking mind on, and you'll be able to debunk easily 5 to 8 of them right off the top of your head without even thinking about it. They're very easy. Do your own research, okay? And by this, we're not going to do your homework for you. Many people are getting into this brand new and like, what about this? What about that? Look, we've been at this. We got video. I got hundreds of videos up there. I got at least 200 plus videos on my channel alone. I know Bob and those guys got to have at least that much, probably double that. A lot of people have already done a lot of hard work in this. If you're going to ask questions, go look and see what the answer is first. And realize this is not a get-rich-quick scam, okay? No one's getting rich off of this. I get this accusation all the time from people. Oh, Skiba's just doing this for fame and fortune. I'm like, what are you smoking? This guy right here is another creationist out there, and he put an article out recently to promote Danny Faulkner's book, and he's got a page dedicated to debunking flat Earth, and he says all of the top supposed flat Earth believers have ad revenue enabled on their YouTube channel. It is my proposal that they are pretending to believe in a flat Earth because they are generating hundreds of thousands of dollars per year from ads shown on their YouTube videos. Hey, Bob, are you getting hundreds of thousands of dollars a year? Yeah, okay. Yeah, he says it like 3 times. He concludes later, pure truth isn't popular. On the other hand, deceptions are often very popular. And we've noticed that the flat Earth videos on YouTube receive millions upon millions of views. That relates to very hefty sums of money being given to those channels in ad revenue. No, that's not true. And in the interest of full disclosure, if you want to know what a YouTuber is making, go online. There's a website called socialblade.com. You can type in the URL of your favorite YouTuber, put it into this website, and it'll tell you how much money they're making. And this is my stats right here. Pretty good. I've got 26 million views on my channel, right? What do they say? My ad revenue is estimated between $103 a month to $1,600. That's pretty accurate. Last month it was like $400, okay? And total estimated yearly revenue is $1,200 to $19,000. So that's pretty reasonably accurate right there. As far as YouTube ad revenue, most of my videos get demonetized. This is my Gmail account. You see something common there? Copyright claim, copyright claim, copyright claim. There's something like 286 messages there, and they're almost all the same. Copyright claim, I get flagged all the time because I use third-party content. How many videos have I showed you just in this presentation here? And so I could have a 3-hour presentation, use 30 seconds of your video, and you get to monetize it, I don't. YouTube has no concept of what fair use means. And so, yeah, no. I may have 26 million views, but it doesn't translate to dollars. In fact, I did a search. I've been on YouTube for 75 months, just before I was coming here to prepare my presentation. And not that it's anybody's business, but I made $76,500 in 6 years. Okay, and you divide that out, that comes out to about $12,750 per year, not hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And if you take that full number and divide it by 75 months, it comes out to $1,020 a month. Oh, wow, I'm looking for my private jet, okay? Bob, you want to go shopping with me? I easily put way over 40 hours a week into what I do. And if you divide that out just by let's just say it's a 40-hour work week, that comes out to $6.38 an hour I'm making. And I'm supposedly part of this big, evil, flat earth conspiracy to make creation ministries look bad. That's what they're coming after me for. Yeah, for what, 87 cents below minimum wage? Sorry. No, it doesn't work out that way. So if you're looking at this whole flat earth thing with the idea this is a get rich quick scheme, no. If you want to know how to get rich on YouTube, check out this website right here, this channel on YouTube. Have you ever heard of this website, How To Basic? First of all, it's a genius name for a YouTube channel. How To Basic, right? It's got, how to change a tire, how to do this, But when you click on that, you go to, because you're thinking, I want to know how do I install a door or how do I, fix a computer. And then you click on the video, and I just chose a short one here to show you what type of video you're going to get, like how to fix a leaky toilet. All of his videos are exactly like that, okay? And you go look at this guy's stats. He's making an estimated income of $5,400 to $87,000 a month, $65,400 to $1 million a year. If you want to make money on YouTube, that's what you do. You don't get into flat freaking earth. Okay? I mean, wow. Can't even tell you how many times I get accused of that. Okay, and for those of you who claim to be Bible-believing Christians, look, the simple fact of the matter is the Bible is a flat earth book from cover to cover. It just is. And when Mark challenged me to, prove that I believe the globe, as a Bible-believing Christian, that should have been the first place I went, but it wasn't. It was actually after I'd already gone through the NASA stuff and seen the clouds not moving, CGI, concept, artist concept, and all that stuff, that I was like, what is going on here? And then I finally went back to the Bible. But I went to the Bible with a prayer. And I would suggest anybody who's interested in doing this needs to pray the same prayer. Is, Father, if I'm bringing preconceived bias to the text, please remove it from me. Allow your Holy Spirit to tell me what the text is saying. If you pray that prayer, you're not going to get very far. You're going to get to verse 6. Chapter 1 of the first book, and you're going to run into this thing called the firmament. I'm sorry, Danny Faulkner, but it's not the expanse of air, gas, and the vacuum of space. I've got lots of videos talking about that, but in summary of if you just go to my YouTube channel, most of my YouTube channel is talking about the biblical case, but I'm going to go through it pretty quickly here. We live in a self-contained three-tiered system, heaven, earth, and underworld, according to all the text references that you see there. And by the way, this isn't thus saith the Lord, this is thus thinketh Rob, okay? I'm an artist. This is, when I read the text, this is what I see in my head. I'm not telling you this is what we live in, okay? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm telling you that when I look at the Bible and other ancient texts, this is essentially what I see in my head. When I take all the components together that I'm showing here, this is what I see in my head anyway. There is a solid firmament, dome, vault over us, according to all the texts that you see there. Yahuwah's throne sits above the heavens and the waters, according to all the texts that you see there. The earth is inscribed in a circular, flat fashion into something with four corners and surrounded by water, according to all the texts you see there. The sun, moon, and stars are in the firmament, and all the stars are going to fall to this place. That was a deal breaker for me. You got Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah. You got Yeshua, Jesus Christ himself, the Son of God, the Creator, telling us that all the stars are going to fall to earth. You got Peter and John in the New Testament telling us that all the stars are going to fall to earth. Well, we've got a really big problem if Betelgeuse is headed our way, followed by Arcturus and the constellations and Andromeda. And oh, by the way, Andromeda is just one of billions and billions of galaxies out there. All of them with billions and billions of stars with, planets around it. All that's coming here. Somebody's lying. And I'm not prepared to say that it's Isaiah, Yeshua, Peter, and John. No. Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michio Kaku, you guys are lying. Gene Roddenberry, George Lucas. All right? All the stars are falling to earth. Somebody's lying. There are floodgates or windows in the firmament, according to text you see there. Earth is a geocentric, stationary world set on pillars, according to text you see there. From Genesis to Revelation, the earth is consistently described by Holy Spirit-inspired authors as fixed and not moving, spinning, orbiting, etc. Circular, with edges, corners, pillars, foundations, etc. Under a dome within which the sun, moon, and stars are placed on day 4. And I put these two up there. This is the interior of the model that I showed you there, essentially the footstool of God, which is a better fit for a stationary world set on a firm foundation of pillars under a solid dome within which the sun, moon, and stars move and which will accommodate all the stars falling to earth. Which one? It's pretty easy when you just allow the text to speak for itself. Now, of course, people will look at that and they listen to things that I say and they say, well, why should we even trust the Bible? Why should we? That's a much bigger discussion, all right? We could spend a whole weekend talking about that. In my early journey, people think that I just accept everything on blind faith. I don't. I've questioned my faith. I've questioned the Bible. I've wrestled with all the same arguments that Jaron and others have posted, and I understand some of the arguments, the problem with the text being changed and people tampering with all that stuff. But you know what? That's why God allowed the Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic text to be preserved, and why they pop out of places like the Dead Sea Scrolls, and where we can take and look at the various English translations and compare them to the earliest known remaining copies that are out there, and they're out there by the hundreds, in some cases thousands, okay? I've looked into it. Now, there's certainly many books I can recommend. These are 3 books that were early in my own personal quest, trying to understand, that had an impact on me. Evidence that demands a verdict, more evidence, and revised versions of it, new evidence and stuff like that. These are all by Josh McDowell. And there are, of course, C.S. Lewis and many other people out there, Lee Strobel. A lot of people start out as atheists. I'm going to prove the Bible wrong. Guess what happens? They end up proving that it's right. Matt Long just did a conference, the Skyfall conference just recently. You should check out his video. He did a good apologetic on it too, talking about the trustworthiness of Scripture. And of course, I would point to my own personal experiences, but those are mine. You can't relate to that. You'd have to have experiences of your own. But I hear this one all the time. Rob, you're just making Christians look stupid. You ever hear that before? You ever said that before? Okay, I'm going to help you out with this a little bit. If you call yourself a Christian, you already look stupid. Here's a news flash for you. Here's some of the things that we already believe. That, people who don't believe the Bible, who don't have that faith, they look at us and we're like, we believe that the universe and everything was created in 6 literal days. We believe in 2 magic trees. And a talking snake. We believe that Moses split the Red Sea. A dude with a talking donkey like Shrek. The walls of Jericho come crumbling down with the trumpets. Joshua commanded the sun and the moon to stand still, right? Now, how many of you know in a legal system words mean things, right? If he was taking authority over the sun and moon, and the way everything worked is the way we've been taught, the Copernican principle, he said, sun and moon, stand now still over, and he told them to stand still over very specific geographic locations, too. So do you think God and the angels were up there going, well, geez, he doesn't understand Copernicus because he's not come around yet. I don't, let's stop the earth. Because that's the only way that would be possible, right? Is to stop the earth from rotating and stop the moon from rotating and orbiting. Never mind the fact we'd have wind shear and oceans and everything else, have all kinds of problems. And then after they did their little thing out there, completed their battle, do you think God's like, okay, spin it back up again? Whee! There's nothing in the Bible that said it was ever spun up to begin with. In fact, there's like 67 verses that tell you the place is stationary, not moving, fixed, right? But no, the Bible tells us Joshua commanded the sun and moon to stop. The length of a dude's hair gave him supernatural strength. Wow, That's awesome. A few guys chilling out in a fiery furnace, remaining unharmed. A dude spends 3 days and 3 nights in a fish and then pops out and starts preaching. Oh, here's a big one. A Savior born of a virgin who walked on water, did miracles, died, rose again in 3 days, hung out for a few more weeks, then flew up into the sky like Superman with the promise of returning on a flying horse, followed by a floating city. Huh. All that sounds pretty crazy, doesn't it? Unless you happen to believe it. People out there that don't believe that, they think we're crazy already. So if your big concern is don't get into flat earth because you're going to make Christians look stupid, I'm helping you out here. We don't need any problem looking stupid. We got charismatic wackiness and people flipping around on the ground laughing and, prayer cloths. You buy this prayer, donate $100 and you get a prayer cloth that we personally blessed, angel feathers and all that stuff. How many failed rapture predictions have we had, right? That the Bible guarantees. Yeah, we have no problem looking stupid. But you know what? Let me encourage you here, because if that looks silly to you, wait till I show you in the next section when we come back after the break what they believe. What the other side believes is infinitely more stupid than anything that I just showed you here on the screen. And when you look into the beliefs of other ancient cultures, it doesn't take you long. You start looking into the other ancient cultures. The Sumerians had a similar belief of an enclosed world system. Same thing with the Egyptians and the Greeks. You look into the Native American tribes, the Mayan, the Incan, the Navajo cosmology, same thing. Look into the Norse and Irish cosmology. You can even go see the movie Thor and look at how they depicted Asgard. Right? They're being true to their ancient text in the movies right there. What caught my eye, though, in this rendition right here, see the big spire they have there in the center right there? How many of you heard of Mercator before? If you've been to public school, you've probably seen the Mercator map, right? Hanging up on the wall right there. Yeah, you need to look into this. What did Mercator know? There's a letter that he wrote to John Dee in the year 1577. Just Google this. Look up the letter John Dee that Mercator wrote to John Dee, wherein he describes in great detail, by the way, he's the guy that made this map that you've seen. He describes in great, what they don't show you though, we've seen this map before, but what you don't see in the original map that he created was in the legend area there, he had another section talking about the North Pole, and this is what he depicted in his map. And other ancient maps have very similar depictions as well. This is what's the North Pole. So what Joshua was talking about earlier, yeah, I want to go to the north. I have no interest in going to the south. It's way colder down there, way more hostile, and frankly, what's in the north to me is way more interesting. Because the ancients were all talking about this, and as recent as 1577, Mercator, the guy that drew all our maps that we've seen, talked about this in great detail about 4 mountainous islands divided by 4 rivers, large rivers, that he called indrawing seas. And he says we're so powerful that if you had the misfortune of getting caught in one of these rivers, you're not getting out. Those rivers are going to suck you into the middle, where there's a whirlpool, a 480-mile-across whirlpool that's going to suck you into, that surrounds a massive 33-mile in circumference magnetic mountain that the ancients called Mount Meru in the center, or the Rupus Negra. Many cultures actually shared this belief, but Mercator, of all people, documents it quite thoroughly and had included it on his maps of the world. And so, you look at what he's saying and you look at what all the other ancient cultures are saying, and if you're being intellectually honest with yourself and with the words being used in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek in your Bible, this is what you end up with. This is, an artist's conception that some people from Logos Bible Software depicted this. This is the Hebrew concept of the universe. Now, they don't like me showing this right here. In fact, they came after me for copyright for doing it. They said I was sharing paid content for free. I'm like, well, you guys share it. If you buy their software is very expensive software. Okay, but if you buy their very expensive software and you get to this page right there, there's a little share button. And if you click the little share button, that allows you to take their paid content and put it through their software onto social media. Once it gets on social media, it's out there. And they use it in their own materials. Dr. Michael Heiser, now say it out loud with me. Michael Heiser does not believe in the flat earth. Okay, I have to continually say that because there's always some idiot out there trying to say that I'm using Michael Heiser's work to say that he believes in the flat earth. No, he doesn't. But he's being intellectually honest with himself and with the text by saying, look, this is what the Bible says. He's an ancient Semitic language expert, okay, and very knowledgeable in ancient Near East and cultures and stuff like that. And he's going through the text, going through the Bible, being intellectually honest with it, saying, this is what they believe. Now, he personally does not believe it. Neither do the people at Logos Bible Software. But the problem is a whole lot of people are seeing this picture, realizing for themselves what the Holy Spirit, I believe, is confirming in their spirit when they're reading it and saying, well, this is what the Bible says. And now they're backpedaling and getting really upset about it because they're getting a whole lot of converts from their own software. And I'm like, do you stand behind your software? Do you stand behind your scholars with letters after their name? Better yet, do you stand behind what you say the Bible says? And why are you coming after me personally when so many other people are out there sharing this? Because people are converting. Yeah. Here's an earlier video that I did when I was first looking at these graphics and stuff, and I'm like, okay, I can see now that this is what the Bible's saying. How does this stuff work? And I was trying to figure out how do the night and day work and the 4 seasons and all that kind of stuff. This is a video, and some of you maybe have these questions. Well, how does it work? This was an early video I did on that question. So very early on in my investigation, as you can see, May 26, 2015, I was trying to figure out how does the sun work over the flat earth, and I came up with this model. Now, I stated right from the start this was not meant to be to scale. This one's a little better. I still think the sun may be a little bit too big, but you see the sun going over the equator here at an altitude of approximately 3,000 miles, according to this scale right here. And a lot of people will say, well, you know, what is the sun acting like a spotlight? No, it's not acting like a spotlight. And to prove that, I'll bring in a little 3D object here, and I'll bring in a little dome on top of it here to show you that this light is throwing off in all directions. Up, down, all around. It's not a spotlight. So all the critics out there, you can stop saying that. It's not shining as a spotlight. It's what's known in 3D as a point light that has been adjusted with a limited light throw attenuation. Now, shortly after I did that video, I was trying to figure out how the 4 seasons work, and you can see that video right here on YouTube, how the 4 seasons work on the flat earth model. And that one was really interesting. And I actually discovered this quite by accident, really. This video came as a result of me trying to figure out on the globe, how does the 24-hour sun work? And so I used Stellarium, which is heliocentric globe-based software. And you can put your location of observation wherever you want. So I put it in Antarctica. I think it was in the Ross Ice Shelf area or somewhere like that, wherever you supposedly can see 24-hour sun. So I put my camera there, and then I pulled it. You can adjust the camera and the type of lens you use, and you can adjust it such that you could either look at each cardinal point, north, south, east, or west, or in the case of what I did, I pulled the camera into the earth and used the fisheye lens setting so that I could see all 4 cardinal points at the same time. And then I just got rid of the ground plane and removed the stars. So the only thing I could see then is the sun and moon. And I set it to record for a whole year real fast and recorded that. And this software, heliocentric globe-based software, showed the sun and moon speeding up and slowing down as it was creating these circles. And I just thought, geez, I wonder what that would look like on the flat earth map, on the AE map. So I just superimposed it on that, and then I just flipped it horizontally because I'm looking down instead of looking up. And it actually showed the sun and moon going between the tropics and slowing down when it gets in the northern so-called hemisphere and speeding up when it gets in the southern hemisphere. But of course, the critics look at this and they ask a reasonable question.
Does it change speeds? Because the circle's bigger out here in the wintertime going around the Tropic of Capricorn. So what is speeding the sun up and then slowing it back down? It was constantly changing directions and speeds with your model.
Yes, it was. Again, heliocentric globe-based software created that. And interestingly enough, I found a video online that a guy went apparently on the Tropic of Cancer at a certain time of the year, on the equator, and on the Tropic of Capricorn, and videotaped the moon going across the screen. Now, he had it at double speed, and I made it a lot faster just for the sake of this video, but sure enough, the moon was moving at different speeds across his lens. Fastest over the Tropic of Capricorn, medium over the equator, and slowest over the Tropic of Cancer. I'd be curious to see how the globers explain this. But at least the moon here reflected exactly what Stellarium, heliocentric globe-based software, had depicted. And I can only assume if the moon's doing this, the sun must be doing the same thing. though I'm unaware of any tests that have been done in that regard. How crazy is that? I think it was Dave Marsh did that video. I don't remember for sure who did it, but it literally showed that. And heliocentric, globe-based software showed the sun speeding up and slowing down. So how would that work in the Copernican model? I have no idea. But when it ultimately came down to the Bible and looking at it, the firmament was truly the key for me. It's what sealed the deal in more ways than one. Unquestionably, the thing is hard, according to Job 37:18, firm, Proverbs 8:28, supporting the waters above, Genesis 1:6-8, Psalm 148:4, attached to the earth, Amos 9:6, within which Yahuwah placed the sun, moon, and stars, Genesis 1:14-19 and 19:1-6, and upon which his throne sits, Ezekiel 1:26, Isaiah 66:1. Clearly, this is a very important issue to Yahuwah, Psalm 19:1. The only model that accommodates every aspect of the firmament is the circular, enclosed world model. The only way around this is to grossly misrepresent the scriptures, yanking the true meaning of the words used out of context, and fantasizing about definitions for those words which are not even remotely supported by the text or the historical context in which the scriptures were written. And when I took Hebrew, I was taking Hebrew 101, and they were telling me that there's an idiom that says if every letter has 7 meanings, then every word has 70 meanings. And they didn't have numbers. The Hebrew letters substitute as numbers, so that the letters themselves have numerical value. But each letter has meanings in and of themselves, and they have what they call a 2 or 3 letter, I think it's called a sheresh, root word, upon which you can add prefixes or suffixes to make more words, but those words will have the inherent meaning not only of the word itself, but also the root word and the letters that make up the word. So that's hence the idiom. So when I was looking at the letters that make up the word rakia in Hebrew, you have these 4 letters right here. The meaning of the resh is the highest, most important. The kof, the last, final, future. The vav, yod, is work, and the ein, see, understand, and reveal. So if you put it together in a sentence, you got the firmament means the highest, most important, final, last, final, future work to see, understand, and reveal. How cool is that? How cool is it that we're having this discussion in a place called the firmament? That's just awesome. I think it is very important that this information is coming out now of all time in human history, right? The 21st century, with all the stuff we claim that we know, right? We're coming to an understanding of the firmament, and that's the meaning of it? Wow. Then you start going out there and doing your own tests, like I mentioned earlier, and you start finding out that terrestrial-based observations consistently confirm a flat Earth, and still you got people out there saying stuff like this.
The Earth is round, and here's the proof. Remember Felix Baumgartner? He jumped from the edge of space a few years back to perform the highest parachute jump ever. Well, that was on a live feed in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and you can clearly see the Earth's curvature. So yes, there is tons of proof that Earth is a sphere.
Yes, yeah. There's another one, right before it hits the ground, right? 5 feet curvature. I posted this on Facebook literally last week, right? There's a globe in the region of Earth that's being depicted from the ISS, and people were defending the picture on the bottom, right? That's the Persian Gulf right there, right? I think it is what is it? Gulf of Hormuz, something like that? Strait of Hormuz, yeah. In their picture right there, that's like the entire northern hemisphere. And they are telling me that that's an accurate picture and telling me I don't have any critical thinking skills. Really? Wow. That's on my Facebook page from last week. So when I first got into this, of course, you had everybody say, oh, you're an idiot. If you've ever been to the beach, you've seen the curve of the earth. It's cathartic for me to say that way. It helps me cope. So I started going to the beach and taking pictures over and over and over again. This is in California, and I went up into the mountains of Malibu up there, and looking across the whole distance that you see there in the background there, that's like 100 miles across right there. And everything I did, taking pictures and putting a straight line on there, there's no curve there. I'm not seeing any curve. They're telling me that there's curve, but you just take pictures of it without using a fisheye lens, and you're going to see there's no curve there. Then I met a guy who was helping me out with my seed project, another writer. He grew up in the Ventura area as a lifeguard, and there's this place called the Anacapa Arch, and from where he was, almost like 20 miles away, you could see it on a clear day. You could see the Anacapa Arch, and it's only like 40 feet high, I think it was. So he's like, wait a minute. So he goes to a buddy of his that was like a math professor at a university, and he says to the guy, we live on a globe, right? Yeah, of course. Well, what's the math for that? They figure out the math for that. It's roughly 8 inches per mile squared. So he said, if we had an object that's about 40 feet high, about, let's say, 20 miles away, you're telling me we shouldn't be able to see it? Oh, absolutely not. And the guy goes, well, the problem is we've all seen it. And the math professor goes, what are you talking about? He goes, the Anacapa Arch. All of a sudden, you're hearing the Flintstone sound effect go off in his head, right? Anytime Fred gets confused, you hear that, right? That goes off, and the guy's like, whoa. He turns around, he's looking at the math board. He's trying to figure out where did he go wrong, because they've all seen it. And that's the problem. That's why so many people are converting, is because we are seeing things on earth for ourselves that you are not supposed to be able to see. You're just not. And then they said, well, if you've ever flown in an airplane, you've seen the curve, right? So I started flying in airplanes all the time. I started taking pictures outside the airplane, bring it into Photoshop, put a line across it, it's perfectly straight. Then, of course, this picture comes out right here, Joshua Nowicki. You guys remember this picture? He sends it to the ABC News affiliate at the time. This guy says, what you're seeing here is a mirage. Now, immediately I looked at that and said, that's not a mirage. They're upside down, wavy, distorted. They're not perfectly symmetrical, straight up and down, No. So my friend Rick Hummer, who lives right in that area, he's like, wow, this news station is in his local area. And he's like, what is he talking about? We've all seen Chicago. In fact, he got in trouble in school for saying he could see Chicago when the teacher said that's impossible. It's like, I see it all the time, right? So Rick Hummer and I determined we're going to just get in a boat and drive across that thing. And now this is at the time when I was still very skeptical. I was calling myself a zetetic agnostic at the time. I was 100% the Bible said that it was flat. But I was claiming the scripture says prove or test all things, right? So that's why I'm going to try to prove or test the Bible now. And so I was calling myself a zetetic, meaning proceeding with inquiry and investigation, and agnostic, meaning not fully convinced either way. So I said, Rick, we've got to get a boat. And my thinking was, if it's a mirage, then when we get close to it, it's going to magically disappear, and then the city will roll up over the ball, and there it will be. If it's just the city, then it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger in the camera. So it took us the better part of a year to finally get to the point where we had the money, our schedules worked out, and we could get a ship captain to agree to do it. And it finally all worked out. Actually, it was the weekend of my birthday, 2016. We went across the lake, and that changed everything for me. And at the same time that all that was happening, the news anchor actually got, that poor guy, he had no idea his little news, weather report was going to go viral like it did. And the guy probably got slammed by flat earthers calling him a shill or whatever. People going crazy on him of that whole thing. So he actually wanted to look into it further. So he went to a university near him to see if what he had said was accurate. Come to find out, what he said was not technically correct. This is a video that they did later explaining what they think is going on. And what they really did, though, was, at least for me, they showed me why the lower part of buildings can be obscured, and why sometimes the lower part of ships are missing at a distance and stuff like that. Listen to what they have to say.
So is all this under Mirage, and then looming is under Mirage, or what are the semantics of looming versus Mirage?
Okay, well. That's all. I guess that's all in the details of the terminology. And from what I understand, technically, I think Mirage has to have an inverted image, whereas there are other atmospheric effects such as looming or towering that are purely displacement, and you don't necessarily have to have an inverted image in order for refractive effects to occur in the atmosphere.
So they would all fall under the category of atmospheric refraction.
I guess that would be a good thing to say, yes.
Okay, so again, this is their graphic. According to them, we know the Earth's a ball, so therefore this is the way it's working. Chicago's over here on the left. We got the curve of the Earth here, and the light rays, which would normally be going straight across, have to be bent due to the atmospheric lensing, the density of the atmosphere and whatnot, causing the light to refract downward basically just conveniently enough over the top of the bulge of the curve so that we can see it on the other side. Now, here's where I would differ with this whole idea. Again, just sort of flipping the board. Let's just say we don't start with any preconceived notions of the Earth as a globe. Let's entertain for a moment the completely absurd notion that water is flat and it always seeks its own level. And we're looking across a flat plain of water, 46 miles across. Check this image out right here. Now, I caught this image shortly after Rick and I returned from our trip across the lake. We grabbed a bite to eat, and then we went out to the beach, and it was still clear out, so we got the camera out and looked 46 miles across the lake to see this right here. This image is extraordinary, okay? The boat right here, I'm gonna guess, is less than a mile away. And I base that because these people walking in front of the camera here are walking across some rocks that sort of jut out and kind of fence in the harbor area. And they are only about a quarter of a mile away from where we were when I shot this. I shot this image from right about here. This is where we were looking across, and this is the area right here where those people were walking. And the boat, as you could tell by the size of the people on the boat, wasn't too much further beyond that. So maybe a half mile to a mile, or at the most, I would say, away from where we were. All right, now when I was headed back to Chicago to catch my flight, I snapped this picture of the Willis Tower. And this is, if you go on Google Earth, this is right about the area right here where I believe I was when I took that picture. Looking across, it's only about 0.6 of a mile. So I'm just a little over a half mile away, and look at the size of the tower as compared to the car that was diagonally in front of me. We were looking at the Willis Tower from this direction right here when we were on the other side of the lake. Now, okay, so let me slide the car over and shrink it down to the appropriate scale beside the boat. Do you see something rather interesting here? This building is significantly magnified. The image on the left shows the size and scale of the building next to a car at 0.6 of a mile away. The image on the right shows the same building and the same car with a boat at 46 miles away. The atmosphere really is acting like a lens. What type of lens? A convex lens or a magnifying glass. So I'm going to suggest this is what's happening. The atmosphere is acting like a lens, which magnifies the city, brings it up a little closer, and as it does so, we start to lose a little bit of the bottom of the buildings, and perhaps due to the density in the atmosphere, there's an additional refraction that takes place that makes it drop down even more. Huh. Just like we saw. Now, this is a still frame from the half-hour video that I did, and the numbers you see there are all based on the numbers that Tony was giving me based on his device. His device said it was 37 nautical miles, which is 42.6 statute miles, but when you plot the same exact location that we were at, the exact distance you get on Google Earth is 46 miles. So you basically add about 4 miles to all the numbers that you saw in the half-hour video. But here's where it gets interesting, at least to me. Both of these pictures were taken with the same camera. Now, if you remember from the half-hour Chicago skyline video, I was saying I can see Chicago. We're about 42 miles away. I can see it. The problem is trying to get the camera's having trouble focusing on it because it's moving up and down and it's so zoomed in. But I can totally see it. Rick was not zoomed all the way in. He was using my camera, the Nikon Coolpix P900, but he was only zoomed in about halfway when he grabbed the shot above. Now, I know that when I got the image below, I was zoomed all the way in. Both of these images were shot from the harbor area here. The red line at the top is where we were in the boat. We're just about to depart when I asked Tony to stop, and I got the camera out to shoot Chicago. And the lower red line is where we were on the beach when I took the picture on the bottom there. So, and the distance between those two locations is less than a quarter of a mile. So it's negligible. We're still looking about 46 miles across either way. Now, here's the shot from the beach before I zoomed in. Now I'm zooming in, and I'm gonna stop it right about here. That's about halfway on the zoom, and I believe that's where Rick had the camera set when he took the picture above, based on the size of the building right here. I'm gonna guess that he was about halfway. All right, so let's go ahead and continue the zoom. And this is zoomed all the way in. The Nikon Coolpix P900 has an 83 power optical zoom, and that little punch in right after that was the digital zoom afterward. It has a digital zoom that goes beyond the 83 power. I did not go all the way in with that. I just punched it a little bit because I wanted to frame it with the ship right there. So that's 83 power plus. So gonna guess it's probably the equivalent of about maybe 90 power zoom or so right here. Now let's bring the picture in from the halfway zoom, and I'm gonna go ahead and bring our car back in and slide the picture in from Chicago, and I'm gonna scale the car to the appropriate size to the boat right here, and go ahead and slide the car over to the building. So this is what the car and the building look like at half zoom. So let's try something else here. I'm going to unfreeze the video and back it off so it goes backwards, and we're zooming out back to the shoreline, and now I'm gonna bring it forward again, and let's see, right about here is where we have some fairly decent resolution where you can still make out the building. I'm gonna zoom in here with the computer. This is a computer zoom right now on this still image, and I'm going to bring the other image in from the half zoom and scale the car over to the digitally zoomed in image of the almost completely zoomed out shot. And so you got three different zooms here. One almost completely zoomed out, one zoomed about halfway on an 83 power optical zoom lens, and the one on the right, of course, all the way zoomed in with a little touch of digital zoom on top of that in the camera. And when looking at these images compared to the one on the left, which was just shot with my iPhone, I gotta tell you, it looks like it's being magnified to me, especially when you consider the fact that that building is like 45 miles away from that boat. It's 45 miles away. So, looks like there's some serious magnification going on here. And, you know, some of that could be due to the lens, I'll give you that. But I also know what I could see with my own eyes. Now, I understand you may not want to take my word for it, so all I can say is go up there and do it yourself. But based on what I saw with my own eyes, as well as what the quote-unquote experts had to say regarding how the atmosphere can act like a magnifying glass, I'm still going to go with it as being magnified. There is a lot of water in our atmosphere. But I'm thinking if the atmosphere, especially over water, is made up of zillions and zillions of tiny convex drops of water, then collectively, perhaps they all combine to make one big convex lens, in which case it would act like a magnifying glass. Okay, so with that in mind, let's look up some websites dealing with the refraction of light. You might see a graphic, something like this, showing light bending downward, just like the weatherman guy said. And here's your typical graphic showing how light rays entering some sort of medium, like in this case water, refraction causes the light to bend downward. Now we've all seen pictures of, you know, a pencil or something in a glass of water, and how not only does refraction bend the image downward, it also magnifies it. I'm going to say that again. Water causes refraction, bending the image downward, and magnifies it. So this is important now. And let's just go back and hear from the experts once again what's happening with the atmosphere.
The science is the same of that of a lens. Here's a simple example.
So if you're looking at Chicago here, just maybe now you can just see the top of the Sears Tower, and if our simulated temperature inversion moves into place, hopefully now you can see pretty much all of Chicago,
see all the lower buildings,
including what's at ground level.
So the atmosphere really is acting like a lens.
Yes.
Again, based on that imagery that I saw looking 46 miles across versus 0.6 miles across, I really do believe, just like the expert said, the globalist guys, these are the people who believe in the globe now. They are the ones that said, hey, the atmosphere really is acting like a lens, and they put a lens in front of the camera to show how it works. So I'm just doing what they're doing. I went on Amazon and I got these plastic magnifying sheets and came up with another way of doing the same thing, using the sheet right here. Set the city up, a little cutout of the city, and now I've got the big magnifying glass sheet. Bring the camera right up to the lens. See, that's the normal view of the city. Now let's back up again.
The science is the same of that of a lens. Here's a simple example.
So if you're looking at Chicago here,
the atmosphere really is acting like a lens.
Yes.
Atmosphere really is acting like a lens, and this is how much of the city is missing due to the lensing effect, the magnification of the atmosphere. So thinking about all this and thinking about what I had just shown you regarding atmospheric lensing, magnification, refraction, all that with regard to cities and objects at a distance on the land, I got to thinking, I wonder how this would work with the sun and moon. So this is what I came up with. I've got my magnifying sheet frame, and I created a little stand to paste the sun on it and keep it the same height over the flat surface of a table. So the sun is always going to be parallel with the surface. And check this out. All right, here's the first test of a sun moving over a flat surface, and with no atmospheric magnification, it does what we might expect it would. It gets smaller as it goes away from us. All right, now let's see what happens when we add in our atmospheric magnification. Again, water and refraction. Water causes magnification and refraction, right? So let's bring the sun back. Oh, check this out. Refraction bends the light downward. It made the sun set on a parallel surface as it was moving parallel, the same height, the whole way over a flat surface. The refraction caused the sun to set. Not only that, well, let's bring in the beginning of that little test, and we see that it maintained pretty much the same size too. Pretty close. And of course, that's because as it's moving away, the magnification is still taking place. And so even though the sun's further away than it was in the beginning of the test, the magnification basically preserved the same size, and the refraction made it set. Of course, again, depending on how much moisture is in the air, we could see that the sun doesn't appear to change in size at all as it goes down. We could see sometimes perhaps that it looks like it's getting bigger when it goes down. You ever see like a really big sunset or moonrise, moonset, where one of them looks really large on the horizon? Well, that could be because there's lots of moisture in the air causing that effect. Or when there's less moisture in the air, obviously you won't have as much magnification taking place, and so it looks smaller as it goes away. So it's all relative to the amount of moisture that's in the air. Now, I'm just going to put forward a crazy idea for you to think about. And that is, if Rob Skiba could figure this out, I'm just going to go out on a limb here. I think it's quite possible that the creator of the cosmos could have figured out the same thing and engineered our beautiful sunsets, thanks to all that water he placed in our atmosphere. Just something to think about. Thank you. All right. Thank you. That trip showed a whole lot of things to us and explained a lot of things for me anyway, and that's when I finally decided I'm just going to commit. And I'll say this, the verbal abuse that it just radically increased, but so did the favor of God at the same time. And I've never felt so blessed in my whole life that when I finally said, you know what, Father, I just believe you. And could it really be that simple? We're talking $10 in arts and crafts from Walmart. Just explain how the sun and moon work and all kinds of, I'm like, wow, Father, that's amazing. So that's a good place for us to stop. We'll take a few minute break and then come back and wrap up after that. Let's take a break. Thank you. All right, we're about ready to start up again. Can't really tell. Hopefully everybody's coming back and we didn't scare everybody away. Okay, Jake, you can run that again if you would for me. And all right. All right, let's jump back in. Went a little bit long in that last session. They told me I have freedom to keep going, but if you need to pull me off, Karen, just grab the, yank me off. Otherwise, I'll try to go through this as quickly as I can to get through everything in the second half without us going into overtime. I talked about in the previous session what's really stupid. What the Bible says or what they're telling us is science in mainstream education systems. Well, I'm going to submit to you that what they're telling us is science is so completely outrageous, but I think I'll just let them show you for themselves. This is what they think.
The idea that God created the universe went largely unchallenged until the Middle Ages, when scientists made a sacrilegious suggestion based on their observations. The sun, not the earth, was at the center of the universe.
It was a paradigm shift. There is now another way to explain the naturally occurring phenomena around us, and this is science.
Since the Middle Ages, scientists have developed sophisticated new theories about the enormity of the universe and our place in it. Theories that often have no room for God.
Many phenomena have appeared mysterious or miraculous or magical. And then through the process of science, we've eventually understood them. Scientists gradually realized that the sun really is just one star among a multitude of stars in a gigantic galaxy, having hundreds of billions of such stars. And all this was created in a Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago.
But while scientific theories, observations, and experiments tell us where we are in the cosmos, they don't answer the eternal questions: why we're here, and who, if anyone, created us.
The amazing thing is that every atom in your body came from a star that exploded. And the atoms in your left hand probably came from a different star than your right hand. It really is the most poetic thing I know about physics. You are all stardust. You couldn't be here if stars hadn't exploded, because the elements, the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, iron, all the things that matter for evolution weren't created at the beginning of time. They're created in the nuclear furnaces of stars, and the only way they can get into your body is if the stars were kind enough to explode. So forget Jesus. The stars died so that you could be here today, okay? And anyway.
By the end of the 1920s, astronomer Edwin Hubble, working with the large 100-inch telescope atop Mount Wilson outside Los Angeles, had established that our galaxy was only one of many galaxies in the universe.
We look out at other galaxies. On average, they're moving away from us. And those that are twice as far away are moving twice as fast. And those that are 3 times as far away are moving 3 times as fast. And of course, that makes us look like we're the center of the universe.
Such a condition would imply that we occupy a unique position in the universe, analogous, in a sense, to the ancient conception of a central Earth. This hypothesis cannot be disproved, but it is unwelcome and would only be accepted as a last resort in order to save the phenomena. Therefore, we disregard this possibility. The unwelcome position of a favored location must be avoided at all costs, Such a favored position is intolerable.
Several decades ago, we found a problem so great that it was brushed under the carpet for many a decade. And this is the fact that galaxies spin too fast. In fact, 10 times too fast. By rights, the galaxy should fly apart. Therefore, scientists said that we have to have dark matter, a halo of matter that surrounds the galaxy and holds the galaxy together.
And what have they discovered? Absolutely nothing. Zilch.
What is a little bit perturbing is that after 50 years, we still haven't found what the dark matter is. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean they're not there. It just means they're harder to find than we thought.
We look out in the universe, and 85% of all the gravity that's out there has some mysterious, unknown source. We add up all the stars, the galaxies, the planets, the comets, the black holes, the dark clouds, everything out there that we can see, touch, smell, or taste. And it doesn't add up to give us the gravity that we see operating in this universe. So really, we should be calling it the dark force, because we don't know if it's made of matter. It could be a profound misnomer, sending people off in thought directions that might not really be the right path. So dark matter is just simply what we call this thing about which we know nothing, responsible for 85% of the gravity of the cosmos. It is the longest standing unsolved problem in modern astrophysics. Dark matter, dark energy. Everything we know about the universe, what we're made of, galaxies, stars, planets, that's all right here. So, according to this chart, we are 96% stupid.
So the problem with cosmology is that we keep inventing theories, ad hoc theories, to try to explain the data, such as inflation, dark matter, dark energy, and so on, just to keep patching the theory up.
There is a crisis in cosmology. Usually in science, if we're off by a factor of 2 or a factor of 10, we call that horrible. We say something's wrong with the theory. We're off by a factor of 10. However, in cosmology, we're off by a factor of 10 to the 120. That is 1 with 120 zeros after it. This is the largest mismatch between theory and experiment in the history of science.
A very large number of universes, perhaps even an infinite number, could in principle exist in a vast hyperspace.
We can understand the idea of hyperspace by comparing it to a mug of beer.
Beer. The beer mug would be the hyperspace, and the bubbles would be these individual universes. The bubbles in a beer mug are all physically about the same. But suppose they span a range of properties. Some of them might have carbon and oxygen, and stars and gravity, and others don't. We would be in one of the ones that leads to a rich, complex universe culminating with life as we know it.
If there are an infinite number of other universes, the fine-tuning that seems to be present in ours isn't an example of God's plan, but rather the law of statistics. Most of these universes wouldn't naturally develop in ways that fostered intelligent life, but a few would.
So then the explanation for the specialness of the universe is that we are winners in a gigantic cosmic lottery. It stands to reason that we couldn't be living and discussing this in a universe that was hostile to life. Only the bio-friendly ones get populated with thinking beings. Having a multitude of universes is actually quite a simple and natural consequence of some of the most favored models for the birth and early evolution of our universe. It's kind of like stars and planets. As long as you have the capacity to make one, it's easy to make lots of them.
Oh, really? Wow! Beer mug hyperspace multi-bubble verse. Really?
Beer.
Seriously? They're farting out beer bubble universes. Okay? That's what they're doing. Hey, I got an idea. Yep. Multi-beer bubble universe. And they call that science. And they make fun of us? Really? Yeah, I'm not going to take that from them anymore. I'm not going to sit here and let people who think they came from monkeys out of a beer bubble universe ridicule me for looking into what I'm looking into and considering, a possibility. If you guys can think about beer bubble universes, then I can think about a snow globe. Fair enough? Okay, let's move on. That's what they believe. That's what they teach. They're realizing how absurd their own theories are. They add one ad hoc theory upon another to try to justify the things that they can't. They find no observation out there to, for themselves. It's just ridiculous. I mean, Tesla started to see this happening even in his day. He's quoted as saying, "Today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality." They say, "I'm a theoretical physicist." Whenever you hear that, they're working on a chalkboard. Okay, that's it. They're working on a chalkboard. In fact, there's a documentary that William Shatner did, okay? He was interviewing people like Michio Kaku and others, and as only William Shatner can do, right? He's coming up to these guys, he's like, "But what do you do? What do you do?" And the guys, he comes to the conclusion, it's all in his head. The guy's just making stuff up. And Shatner later is quoted as saying, what, science and science fiction are the same thing. It's all imagination. That's what it's turned into. And going back, even further, back into the 1800s, Robotham started to see it too. And Samuel Robotham said, "The whole system of Newtonian astronomy taken together constitutes a most monstrous absurdity. It is false in its foundation, irregular, unfair, and illogical in its details, and in its conclusions, inconsistent and contradictory. Because the Newtonian theory is held to be true, they are led to reject the scriptures altogether, to ignore the worship and doubt and deny the existence of a creator and supreme ruler of the world." He goes on to say, "To say that the scriptures were not intended to teach science truthfully is, in substance, to declare that God himself has stated and commissioned his prophets to teach things which are utterly false." He's right. He's making an honest assessment there. And even other people within secular science are starting to take a hard look at what their discipline is teaching and saying, we got problems here. This is an article that just came out April 30th this year. A guy wrote an article for Scientific American called "Cosmology has some big problems." In the article, he says, "Modern cosmology is in a serious need of a reboot. Compounding this problem, most observations of the universe occur experimentally and indirectly. Now get this, today's space telescopes provide no direct view of anything. They produce measurements through an interplay of theoretical predictions and pliable parameters in which the model is involved every step of the way." In other words, they go in with a preconceived bias, a model they already believe. I thought that's only what religious people do. Believe, and then they create something, and everything they do is based on something that they already had a preconceived bias of. The framework literally frames the problem. It determines where and how to observe. And so, despite the advanced technologies and methods involved, the profound limitations to the endeavor also increase the risk of being led astray by the kind of assumptions that cannot be calculated. He goes on to say, "A key piece of the Big Bang paradigm was criticized by one of the theory's original proponents for having become indefensible as a scientific theory. Why? Because inflation theory relies on ad hoc contrivances to accommodate almost any data, and because its proposed physical field is not based on anything with empirical justification. This is probably because a crucial function of inflation is to bridge the transition from an unknowable Big Bang to a physics we can recognize today. So, is it science or a convenient invention?" He concludes his article by admitting, in order to maintain a mathematically unified theory valid for the entire universe, we must accept that 95% of our cosmos is furnished by completely unknown elements and forces for which we have no empirical evidence whatsoever. That's an honest dude right there, taking a look at secular science. It's not a creationist, it's not a Christian up there saying that. This is a guy taking an honest look at his own profession. And basically, I distilled it all down and said, what is taught today as fact is really nothing more than unproven ad hoc theories based on presupposition derived from outlandish conjecture, which itself was contrived from sheer fantasy, all of which ends up beautifully illustrated by the hands of artists and published in textbooks as self-evident truth. That's where we're at today. So let's talk about this whole model that we've been taught in school. How old is the Earth, and how do we know? Well, we got to look at the whole, there was two things that were proposed, catastrophism and then later uniformitarianism. From 1830 to 1833, his multi-volume Principles of Geology was published. The work, this is Charles Lyell here. The work's subtitle was An Attempt to Explain the Former Changes of the Earth's Surface by Reference to Causes Now in Operation. He was, along with the earlier John Playfair, the major advocate of James Hutton's idea of uniformitarianism, that the Earth was shaped entirely by slow-moving forces still in operation today, acting over a very long period of time, as opposed to catastrophism, an idea of abrupt geologic changes through violent action. Thus, basically, Charles Lyell looked at the stripes in the rock, you know, like at the Grand Canyon and stuff, and he assumed that must have taken millions of years. He just assumed it. He had no proof, he had no dating methods or anything like that, he just assumed it. Today, this is the accepted view of geology. But how accurate is this assumption, and how reliable are our dating methods today? Consider this.
What about the age of the Earth? Isn't there evidence for millions of years? And how do we understand all that? Well, first of all, let's look at what the Bible says. If you take the days of creation as ordinary days, and you take all those genealogies in Scripture, if you add it all up, 5 days before Adam, from Adam to Abraham, and then you add up from Abraham until today, you get about 6,000 years. Now, if the Bible said the Earth is 6,000 years old, there'd be a problem, because it was completed 2,000 years ago. So you see, the Bible doesn't say, here's how old the Earth is. You know what the Bible gives us? A history, and it tells us about the days of creation and when people lived and died and so on, and gives us that history so we can add up the dates, and that's how we get a few thousand years. Well, what about all the dating methods that seem to indicate billions of years? Actually, there are hundreds and hundreds of dating methods that you can use to age date things on the Earth. See, one creation scientist I know makes this statement. He says 90% of the methods you can use to age date things on the Earth contradict the billions of years. Only 10% even seem to give the billions of years. But all dating methods have fallible assumptions. Who's heard carbon dating used to supposedly prove millions of years? Put your hand up. You know, there's a misconception out there in the culture. Do you realize that carbon dating has nothing to do with millions of years? It can't do. Any secular scientist who understands carbon dating will tell you the same. It's got nothing to do with being a creationist or an evolutionist. Carbon dating has nothing to do with millions of years. Nothing. In fact, carbon-14, after about 100,000 years, when you understand radioactive decay, the half-life of carbon-14 is only a few thousand years. So after about 100,000 years, carbon-14, it would be not detectable. Here's how carbon-14 can be used. If something is millions of years old, it shouldn't have radioactive carbon in it. It should have all gone. Let me just do another example here of radioactive decay for you. This is just basic principles. It's so much more complicated than this.
Nearly every textbook and science magazine teaches that the Earth is billions of years old, and the primary dating method used for determining this is what is called radioisotope dating, or radiometric dating. Now, this is a reliable method for measuring absolute ages of rocks and the age of the Earth, right? First off, many scientists now regard the age of the Earth to be between 4.55 and 4.6 billion years old. Okay, so if this method is reliable and accurate, why the 50 million year discrepancy? That seems like a lot. But let's get into some details here and see what's going on. Keep in mind that there's all kinds of scientific jargon on this topic, and so we'll just present a very straightforward, simplified version. Radiometric dating is the process of estimating the ages of rocks based on the decay into other kinds of atoms. For instance, uranium will radioactively decay through a series of steps until it becomes the stable element called lead. The original element is called the parent element, and the end result is called the daughter element. Radioisotope dating is commonly used to date igneous rocks, rocks which formed when hot molten material cooled and solidified. The dating clock started when the rock cooled. During the molten state, it is assumed that the intense heat forced any gaseous daughter elements to escape. It is assumed that once the rock cooled, no more atoms escaped, and any daughter element now found in the rock is a result of radioactive decay since that rock formed. The decay rate is measured in terms of half-life. That is the length of time it takes half of the remaining atoms of a radioactive parent element to decay. Now, of course, that can be measured in a laboratory, and it is assumed that since we know the decay rate, we can calculate backwards and come up with the age of the rock. But is that all there is to it? Here's where it gets tricky. It's true we can measure a decay rate using observational science, but there's another kind of science that is required to accurately calculate dates for rocks, and that is what we call historical science. Historical science deals with the things in the past, and therefore it cannot be repeated and tested. Dating methods require both types of science, because in order to get accurate rock dates, one would have to accurately know both the decay rate and the initial conditions of the rock sample, right? Since radioisotope dating uses both types of science, we can't directly measure the ages of rocks. There are assumptions involved. For instance, how do we know what the initial conditions were in the rock sample? How do we know the amounts of parent or daughter elements now in that sample haven't been altered by other processes in the past? How does someone know the decay rate has remained constant since the rock formed? The answer is they don't. Let's simplify here and talk about a typical hourglass. Let's say you walk into a room and you see an hourglass with sand at the top and sand at the bottom, and some sand sprinkling from the top chamber to the bottom. Well, observational science would allow us to see and measure the sand, and then calculate how long the hourglass has been running, right? We could make our sand measurements and then calculate when the hourglass was turned over, right? Well, those calculations could be wrong, because we may have failed to consider some major assumptions, like, was there any sand at the bottom when the hourglass was turned over? Has any sand been added or taken out of the hourglass? Has the sand always been falling at a constant rate? Since we did not observe the initial conditions when the hourglass started, and we haven't been watching the sand all the time since then, we must make assumptions. All three of those assumptions can affect our time calculations. Now, of course, there's more to understanding all of this, but enough said.
I'm here at beautiful Mount St. Helens in Washington State. You know, just about 40 years ago, this mountain was cone-shaped. But as you can see, it's not like that anymore. Now it's got this horseshoe shape. That's because on May 18th, 1980, this volcano blew its top, literally. The top 1,300 feet of material blasted away, leaving this crater. Now eventually, lava flows formed a new dome, 5 new domes actually, all of which were destroyed by subsequent eruptions. But the 6th dome that formed between October 1980 and 86 is what you see today. It's composed of 2.6 billion cubic feet of lava, and it's quite young, having finished forming just over 30 years ago. Well, in 1996, geologists sent rocks from the lava dome to be radiometrically dated. Now, they used a method called potassium argon. Well, scientists measured how much potassium and how much argon are in the rock, and they calculate the age of the rock, right? But creation scientists have pointed out for years that there are some major problems with radiometric dating. One big one is all of the assumptions that it's grounded on. You must assume that the half-life is constant and that it never varies. You have to assume that there was no contamination. For example, no argon was present in the sample before the decay began. Well, that's a lot of unprovable assumptions. Now, if radiometric dating and the assumptions that it's founded on were accurate, well then Mount St. Helens rocks should have yielded very young ages. After all, the rock was merely about a decade old. You see, the problem is, they didn't. The rock gave an age of 350,000 years. When they dated the minerals within the rock, the problem got much worse. They gave dates of 2.4 million years. This is for a 10-year-old rock. Now, Mount St. Helens highlighted that we shouldn't blindly trust the dates given by radiometric dating. The assumptions clearly aren't accurate, so the dates that they give are also inaccurate. Instead of trusting a method that doesn't even give correct ages for rocks of known age, well, maybe we should trust the Bible's history, which tells us that our Earth is around 6,000 years old.
Okay, so we've established that Big Bang cosmology is complete nonsense. By their own words, they're 96% stupid and off by 10 to 120th power. And we've just seen that dating methods are completely unreliable. Let's consider another possibility for geologic formations that we see. And I would refer to something, an analogy that Kent Hovind used to say. He said, you could put two people looking at the Grand Canyon, a creationist and an evolutionist, and the evolutionist will say, wow, look what the Colorado River carved out over millions of years. And the creationist will say, wow, look what the biblical flood carved out in a matter of minutes. Big difference, right? Your preconceived bias will drive your conclusions. Now, I already told you that I personally come from a biblical worldview, so let's look at what I would say is a much more plausible explanation for geologic formations. There was a guy, how many of you have heard of Immanuel Velikovsky? Anybody hear of him before? Amazing character. He lived around the same time as Einstein and those characters, and he was a big proponent for catastrophism, coming against this whole idea of uniformitarianism. If you haven't read these two books in particular, these are books I read actually as a teenager and have revisited recently. Worlds in Collision and Earth in Upheaval. Highly recommend you check those out. But check this out.
The Earth's surface is scarred by deep canyons, cut into solid rock. But how did they form? A little bit of water over a long time, or a little bit of time with a lot of water? Modern rivers don't generally cut downward into solid rock, so today's river erosion seems incapable of explaining rock canyons. The Great Flood of the Bible, however, provides a possible explanation for such canyons. On May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens, located 95 miles south of Seattle, Washington, erupted. The eruption was triggered by an earthquake centered beneath the mountain that measured 5.1 on the Richter scale. The lateral blast swept out the north side of Mount St. Helens at 300 miles per hour. With temperatures as high as 660 degrees Fahrenheit and the power of 24 megatons of thermal energy, it snapped 100-year-old trees like toothpicks and stripped them of their bark. Before the famous eruption at Mount St. Helens, scientists were mostly familiar with slow-acting examples of geologic change. But at Mount St. Helens, geologists watched the Earth's surface change quite rapidly. Icebergs were buried in hot avalanche material. They melted and formed badlands in days. Eruptions on May 18 and June 10 produced fine layers in hours. On June 10, mud flows cut zigzag canyons 100 feet deep in soft sand and mud, complete with perpendicular side canyons. Canyons that are reminiscent of the geography of Grand Canyon, only 40 times smaller and clearly produced within hours. Mud flows over the following decade cut hundreds of feet into solid rock in just days of cutting time. Fallen trees formed a log mat on the surface of Spirit Lake and dropped bark to the bottom of the lake, accumulating up to 3 feet of bark peat in just a couple years. And vertically floating logs sinking to the bottom of the lake resulted in buried trees in only a decade, similar to the trees of Yellowstone's fossil forest, which are also buried in volcanic layers. At Mount St. Helens, a single mud flow off the mountain carved Engineers Canyon out of soft sediment in a single day, 100 feet deep. And the same thing even happened in solid rock. A series of mud flows created Lewitt and Step canyons on the front face of Mount St. Helens, cutting hundreds of feet into solid rock over just a few years. Grand Canyon is a good example where we find evidence of catastrophic forces at work. Upstream is evidence of huge lakes. These lakes would never have formed if the canyon were already open below them. However, if these lakes had formed from rains after Noah's flood, and if the pressure of these waters broke through and carved through the recently deposited sediments, then we would expect to find surge deposits downstream. Below Grand Canyon, this is precisely what we find. Evidence of a lot of water cutting over a little bit of time. Even though Mount St. Helens is a very small catastrophe compared to the flood or the major catastrophes immediately following the flood, it provides a better clue to what happened in those times than the slow geologic processes which are most commonly seen in the present.
Okay, so now we've already established that the Big Bang cosmological model is nonsense, and we've seen that our dating methods are flawed and bogus, and we've just seen how the biblical flood of Noah is a much better explanation for our geologic formations and things of that nature. Let's go ahead, and this is all easily testable, observable, repeatable science. This is not ad hoc theory and conjecture we're talking about here. Obviously, we could talk a lot more about this, but I'm just giving you highlights here for some things to think about. Let's go ahead and dive into the issue of biological evolution. right? The whole idea that we got here from goo to you by way of the zoo, as Ken Hovind would say, right? This is essentially the standard Darwinian model right there, right? And, we look at what the ancients have done, and you look through the ancient megaliths and all kinds of stuff, the pyramids and all that stuff. I mean, they were clearly highly advanced back then. The only reason that we think it's the ancient aliens must have done it is because we have an evolutionary mindset that we're taught from birth practically, that we are at the pinnacle, we're at the top, right? I mean, we're so smart we think we came from monkeys and we don't even know what freaking gender we are anymore. How smart are we? I mean, right? I mean, think about it. For 6,000 years of recorded human history, nobody anywhere, race, color, creed, religion, or anything, had any problem. Baby pops out, got something hanging down there. Hey, congratulations, it's a boy. No? Oh, it's a girl. You want to get scientific about it? You got an X and Y chromosome, boy. 2 X chromosomes, girl. Okay? It's not what's between your ears that determines your gender. It's what's between your legs. Okay? The fact that I have to explain this in the 21st century is proof of entropy. Okay? But this is the thing. We have been taught that we evolved from goo to you by way of the zoo, and that we are at the top. So when we look back and we see stuff clearly destroying that whole paradigm, the further back you look, the more intelligent we were. Clearly. The more advanced we were. They were doing stuff that even today, with all our modern equipment and science and everything else, we can't figure out how they did it. Right? But this is the model that we've all heard. Now, how many of you heard in school or been taught that we share 97% of our genome with chimps? Have you heard that before? It's one of the justifications, right? They look at DNA and they say, we're 97%, just like chimps. Okay, I found a video. This is not by a creationist or a Christian or anybody like this. This is somebody taking an honest look at their science and is telling you how they came to that number, 97%. Check this out.
When researchers sat down to compare the chimp and human genomes, those single-letter differences were easy to tally, but the big mismatch sections weren't. For example, if a genetic paragraph, thousands of letters long, appears twice in a human scroll, but only once in its chimp counterpart, should that second human copy count as thousands of changes, or just one? And what about identical paragraphs that appear in both genomes, but in different places, or in reverse order, or broken up into pieces? Rather than monkey around with these difficult questions, the researchers simply excluded all the large mismatch sections, a whopping 1.3 billion letters in all, and performed a letter-by-letter comparison on the remaining 2.4 billion, which turned out to be 98.77% identical. So, yes, we share 99% of our DNA with chimps if we ignore 18% of their genome and 25% of ours.
Does that make sense to anybody? Oh, let's ignore 18% of their genome and 25% of ours. Hey, we're 98% the same. That's ridiculously absurd. Especially when you realize that DNA are the codes that make stuff living. Nobody in their right mind would look at, let's say, Adobe Premiere Pro or After Effects and let's say Microsoft PowerPoint and say that they're 98% the same. There's a whole lot. Yeah, we work with a mouse. They got an interface. There's vast difference in the programming between these software, right? Massive. It would be an insult to the programmers to say something like that, right? But that's exactly what we've done to our Creator. In fact, when the people who discovered DNA, we got Francis Crick and his buddy there, the late Nobel Prize winner, Professor Francis Crick, along with British chemist Leslie Orgel, proposed the theory of directed panspermia in 1973. A co-discoverer of the double helical structure of the DNA molecule, Crick, found it impossible that the complexity of DNA could have evolved naturally. Okay, these are the guys that discovered DNA, and they looked at it and they said, there ain't no way this evolved from random chance mutation over time. This is information. Matter does not produce information that leads to complex life forms, right? So what was their grand solution? With no proof, no evidence or anything? Aliens! Aliens must have done it. So they come with the whole idea of panspermia. That's when the idea of panspermia was born. And so how many of you have heard of the Ancient Aliens TV series? Right, that whole series is all about that ancient aliens came and seeded this world to kickstart evolution because they have recognized that our science is falling apart. This whole Darwinian thing is falling apart. It needs intelligent design to make it happen. Thus, when asked if intelligent design was a plausible solution for the evolution of man, this is what Professor Richard Dawkins had to say.
It sounds very laudable to teach the controversy, to teach both theories, but there aren't two theories. There's only one theory around. There's only one game in town as far as serious science is concerned. Of course, you get negative reactions from creationists, but who cares about creationists? They don't know anything.
We're Johnny-come-latelys. We live in the cosmic boondocks. We emerged from microbes and muck. Apes are our cousins.
You don't believe that the Earth is round only if you're an astronaut. You don't believe Napoleon existed only if you're a historian. You believe these things because they're facts, proved by evidence. Evolution is also a demonstrated fact. The truth really is out there. It's not a matter of opinion.
You have written that God is a psychotic delinquent invented by mad, deluded people.
No, I didn't say quite that. I said something rather better than that.
Oh, well, please tell us what you said. Please tell us what you said.
Well, I would have to read it from the book.
No, please.
The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it. A petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak. A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
So that's what you think of God?
Yeah.
So you believe it's liberating to tell people that there is no God?
I think a lot of people, when they give up God, feel a great sense of release and freedom.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No. Nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else.
Evolution is a fact. It's documented by science.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know. Believe these things because they're facts, proved by evidence.
So you have no idea how it started?
No. Nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. Well, but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
Many people are extremely illogical.
I'm skeptical of the claim.
I'm skeptical.
Skeptical of claims
for the ability of random mutations and natural selection
to account for the complexity of life.
Careful examination
Examination
of the evidence
for Darwinian theory
should be encouraged.
So isn't it interesting? The more advanced our technology gets, the more honest scientists, secular or otherwise, are looking at the data and saying, we need a reset. That's across the board, from biological to geological to cosmological. They're all realizing the old models are breaking apart. They're falling apart. So, but the thing is, you listen to these people say, okay, well, it required intelligent design, but they're not going to give the credit to God, so therefore it must have been aliens, but they're just pushing the problem further out. If you've just proven that this can't happen here, what makes you think it can happen there? And furthermore, you're just pushing you're pushing the problem over to their world where we can never, ever go test anything. Who created them? And if evolution's impossible here, how did it happen there? You know, it's just ridiculous. They don't know how it happened. They're even admitting it. But see, people like Richard Dawkins is forced to make a position based on faith, the very thing that he's opposed to. In fact, the more I look into this guy, you know, it seems to me he's a deeply conflicted soul, probably with spiritual damage. I'm not going to go through all this stuff, but I mean, here's a guy who spends his entire life literally at war with somebody he believes doesn't exist. Yeah, I mean, he loves science, but man, it's getting crazy. And so they keep pushing this out there to other worlds, and we get NASA and other space agencies pushing stuff like this over and over and over. How many of you guys are seeing an increase in these kind of articles? More and more articles coming out of other Earths out there that they're finding. That we already talked about, the vast distances. The idea that we could look those many trillions of miles is just utterly absurd. Well, this next video shows how life forming from non-living matter is completely impossible, both here on Earth as well as anywhere else.
What is faith? It is belief in the absence of evidence. Now, I don't propose to tell anybody what to believe, but for me, believing when there's no compelling evidence is a mistake. The idea is to withhold belief until there is compelling evidence.
When I talk to the public about astronomy and this question of life elsewhere in the universe, the most commonly held viewpoint I encounter is surely it's impossible that we could be alone in the universe. After all, how could it be amongst this unimaginable number of opportunities for life to get going? It only happened once, only here. And this is a viewpoint held by many scientists and talking heads in popular media too.
Do you think that there is life outside of Earth, intelligent life in the universe?
Absolutely, there is life elsewhere, and almost certainly intelligent life. It has to be. The odds are just overwhelming. There's 200 billion stars in this galaxy. Well, now it looks like every star has about 10 planets, so there's almost certainly intelligent life.
I assume it's the most frequently asked question, are we alone?
My best guess is that the universe is teeming with life.
There's surely other civilizations out there in the universe. There are 350 billion galaxies out there in the universe.
But an argument based solely on statistical grounds comes with a fatal flaw. And that is that it is perfectly plausible that the probability of life starting from scratch, which we call abiogenesis, is a number which is so small that it greatly outweighs the number of opportunities, the number of worlds out there in the universe for life to get going. For example, if the probability of life beginning is 1 in septillion, say, then the case for a crowded universe evaporates. In such a scenario, we were the only example of a success. And so we are simply unaware of just how unique, how special we truly are. Our anthropocentric bias clouds our view. This is precisely the point made by friend of the channel, Professor Sean Carroll, when he counters Elon Musk's more widely held view that life must be common. Let us make no mistake, though, the vast numbers of stars, the discovery that planets are common, and that even potentially Earth-like planets are common, all of these points move the dial closer towards a crowded universe scenario. But critically, without knowing the probability of abiogenesis, we may simply be moving that dial from, say, 1 in octillion to 1 in septillion. And so crucially, the statistical argument can only really be made if we have two pieces of information in hand. We need both in order to complete our understanding. The number of habitable worlds out there, or potential seats for life more generally, and also the probability of life spontaneously emerging on those worlds. Astronomy has clearly made great inroads about one of these two pieces of information, but what does science tell us about the other? What is then the probability of life spontaneously beginning, the probability of abiogenesis? At a basic level, we certainly know that no lab experiment here on Earth has ever succeeded in creating what we would call life from chemical broths with conditions similar to that of the early Earth. This was first famously attempted by Stanley Miller and Harold Urey in 1952 at the University of Chicago. In what is now often considered the classic abiogenesis experiment, they exposed a beaker of water, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen to gentle heating and electrical sparks which emulated lightning. Now, many organic molecules were produced in this experiment, including 20 amino acids. But neither in that experiment, nor in any experiment since, have we observed the spontaneous production of complex proteins, nor DNA, nor indeed something crawling out of the test tube.
We do not know how to build even a simple bacterium. The simplest bacterium with its 256 protein coding genes, we have no idea how to build it. First of all, we don't know how to build the molecules, the 4 classes of molecules that are needed for it. We don't know how to, even if we had those 4 classes of molecules, assemble them even into the simplest of bacteriums. We don't know how to do that. One can do that with the technologies we have today. We can make technologies, but we can't even make the simplest bacterium. Anybody who would say something contrary does not know what they are talking about. Show me the demonstration. Nobody has ever done it, and it's not because of lack of effort. It's not because of lack of will. First of all, they haven't been able to get the molecules to do this, and if they could make the molecules, even if we were to give them the molecules, they wouldn't have the information. There would be no inherent information in the DNA. But even if we gave them the DNA in the structure that they wanted, they wouldn't know how to put all the components together because of the sophistication within a cell, the interactomes, meaning that the interacting connectivity between the molecules, the van der Waals interactions, all of these have to be in the right place and in the right order for a cell to function.
If you found an ancient clay tablet with strange characters washed up on the shore, you couldn't read it, unless someone had cracked the code. But you'd still know the letters represented a language, even if you didn't know anything else about the author or his civilization. Language is recognizable, even if you can't read it. Take Morse code. It has 3 basic parts: dots, dashes, and spaces. These 3 simple parts are combined to represent letters. There are 26 letters in the English language, which are combined to form over 400,000 words. Those words can, of course, be combined into an infinite number of sequences or sentences. There is evidence that DNA represents a language. 4 basic units, called nucleotides, combine into a code for 20 amino acids. From those few amino acids, the body forms more than 100,000 proteins. Even if you can't read DNA, it still has all the hallmarks of language, a language that biologists are just now beginning to crack. Every tiny cell in our body is packed with 3 feet of DNA, 3 billion nucleotides. The similarity between DNA and human language is uncanny. In addition to codes, both use similar techniques to pack, access, rearrange, copy, and translate information. DNA seems to represent a language, the language of life. An unseen author, the creator of heaven and earth, has left a testimony of his existence in the DNA of every living thing.
For those who believe in evolution, They believe that millions of years ago, somehow life had to arise from matter. As you think about that, it's not just a matter of saying life arose from matter. Life is built on DNA. You've got to have DNA to arise from matter. But not just DNA, you've got to have a language system. Matter produces a language system. Matter has to produce information. People who believe in evolution don't believe in God, and people say matter gave rise to life. You've got to understand, matter had to give rise to zillions and zillions and zillions and zillions of bits of information. And over millions of years, information keeps coming from matter, new information to form all the different kinds of animals and plants, zillions of bits of information. You know what's interesting? We've never seen matter produce one bit of brand new information that never previously existed, not even one bit.
When one looks at a typical textbook, one will see some prehistoric pond and molecules, and those molecules coming together and forming a cell, and those cells coming together and some slithering creature coming out of this pond. That is fallacious. There is no truth in that. We don't even know how to make the molecules. We are lost on how to do this. We can't even make the basic building blocks. But even if we could, from prebiotic type environment to make these, with all the intellect that we put into this, even if we could make them, we have no idea how to assemble them.
This is a cell. What is the origin of life? How do you get a cell like this? What is the origin of something like this? This is an amazing machine. A cell is an amazing machine. It's not just a blob of protoplasm. Every day, it gets harder to have the origin of life, to come up with a scenario, because the origin of life becomes more and more complex every day. A cell is a factory. It has the lipid bilayer, which is extremely selective to let certain things in and not other things. It has all of this substructure in here, these little areas where energy is made in here. It has these microtubules which can form, so you can move matter from point A to point B. If you go to a factory, what you see is these overhead hanging machines that are moving materials from point A to point B. In these systems, and the way they do this is they build these racks, but same thing happens in a cell. You get these microtubules to move material from point A to point B, and then as soon as the material is done moving, the microtubule breaks down and then assembles some other place. You say, well, why doesn't it leave it there? Because then the cell would become too rigid. So it just rebuilds it. It's just amazing factory what's happening in a cell. This is what we have to make. If we want to have origin of life, you got to start here. You don't start here. You start with a single cell. Just build a single cell. That's what we have to do in origin of life. Nobody has ever done this. If you've been taught that simple forms of life have been made, that is a lie that you are believing. Somebody told you a lie. That has never been done. Next slide. Organisms care about life. Molecules don't care. Chemistry, on the contrary, is utterly indifferent to life. Without a biologically derived entity acting upon them, molecules have never been shown to evolve toward life. Never. Molecules don't care about life. They don't know anything about moving toward life. They have no brain. Organisms want to move toward life and keep life going. Molecules don't care about life. Nobody has ever seen molecules assemble toward life. Never. It doesn't happen without a biological entity working on them. I asked all my colleagues, can you show me an example of this? Of molecules moving toward order, moving toward an ordered system where you have a non-regular assembly. Regular assembly is like A, or A, B. That you can get pure thermodynamic assembly. But non-ordered assembly is a non-regular pattern. That's what you have in DNA. We know from computer science you have to have non-regular patterns in order to have complexity for living systems. And I asked my colleagues, do you have any example of molecules without a biological entity acting upon them, moving to give an ordered assembly that is a non-regular pattern? And they sent me papers where chemists have taken molecules and assembled them in that way. I said, non-biological entity. You can't have a human doing this. Molecules don't move toward life. Well, even if you want to have molecules move toward life and you have human beings working upon them, can the human beings do it? And the answer is no. Next slide. So almost every chemical synthesis experiment in origin of life research can be summed up by a protocol analogous to this. They purchase chemicals generally in high purity from a chemical company. All right, so that's what they do. They first purchase the chemicals. They mix those chemicals together in water in high concentrations in a specific order under some set of carefully devised conditions in a modern lab. Then they can obtain a mixture of compounds that have a resemblance to one or more of the basic 4 classes of chemicals needed for life. So what you need for life is you need carbohydrates, nucleic acids, amino acids, and lipids. That's what we know. All life we know composes those 4 building blocks. So they try to make those 4 building blocks. Then they publish a paper making bold assertions about origin of life from these functionless crude mixtures of stereochemically scrambled intermediates, much like Miller did in 1952. Nothing has changed in 66 years. Nothing. Nothing's changed. Exactly where we were in 1952 is exactly where we have remained. Think about what's been done in science in the past 60 years. Nothing has changed in origin of life studies in 66 years. That's important to realize. Then you engage with the ever gullible press to dial up the knob of unjustified extrapolations. Watch the mesmerized layperson exclaim, "You see, scientists understand how life formed." Then you encourage a generation of science textbook writers to make colorful, deceptive cartoons of raw chemicals assembling from cells which then emerge as slithering creatures from a prehistoric pond. That is exactly what is done every one of their experiments.
So what do I say when someone asks me, do you believe there is life elsewhere in the universe? Carl Sagan once famously wrote that faith is belief in the absence of evidence. And honestly, any scientist who says there has to be life out there is putting forward a position of faith, not one supported by observational evidence and statistical reasoning. The most intellectually honest answer to the question is, I don't know.
Okay, so you see the complete and total dishonesty with regard to biology. And yet we're all taught that we evolved. Right? Do you see what's happening in science all across the board? Why should we trust these people about anything? From cosmology to biology. You know, I've said this many times before. When it comes to belief, here are our choices. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and he created us in his own image. In the beginning, nothing farted out the heavens and the earth, and we got here from goo to you by way of the zoo. Or, in the beginning, nothing farted out the heavens and the earth, and E.T. seeded the goo to make you. All right, these are the choices. How did we get here? How did we get to this point? I'm going to go through this real quick here. I'm not going to read everything that I have on this, but personally, I blame the public government-sponsored education system. And when you look into this is all relatively new information for me looking into this, that it was based on a Prussian model that was established in the 1800s, and an important component of the Prussian system was how it defined for the child what was to be learned, what was to be taught, how long to think about it, and when a child was to be allowed to think about something else. This is where the Pavlovian bell ringing each hour of class time comes from in our current school system, right? You're only allowed to think about this for 45 minutes or an hour. Ding, 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 get up, you go over here. Now you're allowed to think about this. Ding, ding, ding. And all the while, there's a globe in the classroom sitting over there. And it's part of everything that they're telling us. Now think about it. None of you believe that we're on a globe from anything you physically saw. You believe it because somebody told you there's a globe. You believe it because somebody you trust, be it the teacher in the front of the room or NASA, the government, and the military, showed you images that they say were authentic, and you believed it. Prior to that, education was a private practice, usually taught at home. A lot of times the church was actually the schoolhouse. All that changed in 1902 when John D. Rockefeller came along. And he created the General Education Board, and he went around and basically got people to, the government to finance this whole thing, and we have this public education. Was he just being a good philanthropist and a general nice guy? No. He said himself, I want a nation of workers, not thinkers. That was his whole thing. And as I started looking into this even more, there are more and more people saying basically the same thing. We don't want people thinking. We just want basically slaves that we can control, that we can manipulate. And then I stumbled across this article. In 1916, this guy that was part of the Model T Ford Club International, he was a technical editor, he said, and I'll just summarize this, that basically we can run this stuff off of vegetables. The Model T could run on vegetable ethanol and alcohol and stuff like that. In fact, according to the articles that I was reading, there was a way to switch between gasoline and basically vegetable-based. And he was just saying, at the end here, an acre of corn stalks will produce 100 gallons of alcohol. Some corn stalks would produce 50% more. Then the distiller can turn around and sell his waste back to the farmer for cattle food. Nothing has been taken from it but the alcohol. All the nitrogenous matter is still there to go back into the soil as fertilizer. Imagine if cars, right from the beginning, when Henry Ford created the Model T, imagine if cars were running off of food, right, plants, that even the byproduct of the distilling process could be sold back to the farmer to use for fertilizer, and nothing harms the earth. Can you imagine how different our world would be? But no, you got Rockefeller out there, Standard Oil, right? It says, meanwhile, as Henry Ford was developing the assembly line for mass quantity automobile production, John D. Rockefeller was extracting and selling ever greater quantities of oil to be used in automobiles. And Ford had told the New York Times, he said, there is fuel in every bit of vegetable matter that can be fermented. There's enough alcohol in 1 year's yield of an acre of potatoes to drive the machinery necessary to cultivate the fields for 100 years. Can you imagine how different life would have been if this was allowed to continue? And I started looking deeper into this, and I'm just going to bypass this, but this is a video that was a video of a guy who actually went to Ford Motor Company, looked at the Model T Ford, and showed you how the carburetor was rigged to be able to switch between gasoline and vegetable alcohol, ethanol, and things of that nature, that you could switch it. And we lived at a time when it was an agricultural, was the main thing in this country was agriculture, right? But you got John D. Rockefeller over to say, no, I want everybody to run off of my gas. So prohibition was engineered. You ever wonder why they just made alcohol illegal? Right? They wanted a more moral society? No. Rockefeller wanted to shut off alcohol so that people would be forced in this automobile thing to use his, oil to run vehicles. And then later, Rockefeller realized that he could use his petroleum stuff and create medicine from it. So then he took over the entire medical system and made everything allopathic and sent people out there to do studies to say that, yeah, vegetables and diet, that's not really anything that should be important. That's quackery, right? We need pharmaceuticals. And so they basically made all of the education system shut down anything that taught nutrition and teach only pharmaceuticals. And they would get government grants and so forth. Western medicine relies on Big Pharma's petroleum drugs, which the body can never ultimately assimilate. For Big Pharma, there is no financial incentive to heal you. You ever think about that? They heal you, they just lost a customer. No. These guys are Luciferians out there trying to just destroy everything. There's a whole bunch of stuff talking about the drug industry and things of that nature, so I'll just keep going past all this. Then I got to the point where, okay, you got Rockefeller basically creating the public education system, destroying health care in America, making it all based on petroleum-based drugs. And then a committee was raised up in the 1950s, a congressional committee, and basically what they figured out is there was a gigantic project to rewrite history, American history. That was a whole big part of it. So when you consider all this, and there's a whole lot more I didn't have time to go through here, unfortunately, you start thinking about, is it really too big a conspiracy when you figure out what they've done to us right from the start? Look in the 1920s, and you start seeing, these are books I recommend you check out. The Hunt for Zero Point, Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion, Electrogravitics. These books right here are talking about in the 1920s, a guy by the name of Townsend Brown had realized that gravity had more to do with electrogravitics than it had anything, electromagnetism, than it had anything to do with Newtonian physics and stuff like that. So they had created and figured out anti-gravity in the 1920s. And this was written about prolifically from the 20s through the 50s until, guess what? NASA shows up in 1958. All that stuff gets buried. And I started thinking, geez, if they had anti-gravity figured out in the 1920s, by the time you get to the 60s, don't you think it would be possible they could have faked anything in a warehouse? They could have totally faked the whole thing. Look into people. Have you ever heard of Edward Leedskalnin? I think that's how you say his name. You ever hear that name before? Coral Castle? That created this huge megalithic castle structure by himself He created this whole thing, huge, like megaton stone thing, and then there was something with a zoning issue, and he had to move it. So like overnight or something like that, or in a very short period of time, he moved this whole thing that he built by himself. By himself, he moved it to another location. Do you think he might have knew something different about gravity than what we've been taught? Yeah, I think so. You look into our history, and why is it that until the internet showed up, none of us knew anything about Tesla? We weren't taught about Tesla. We were taught about Edison and Einstein. You know, Tesla had created free energy. He could have energized the entire world for practically nothing. Of course, that meant that, you know, guys like Edison wouldn't make any money, and J.P. Morgan that was financing this stuff wouldn't make any money. We can't have that. Can you imagine if we had energy all over the world freely available to us, and we were driving cars based on plants, and the byproducts of the distillation could be put back into the industry to grow more plants? What kind of world would we be living in right now? Instead of a world that's been totally robbed of everything, we'd be living in paradise. You know? But things were happening in the 1920s that are just amazing, 20s through the 50s. And in the 30s, you had people, the first men being launched up into the stratosphere, finally getting up into the sky. You know, early 1900s, they create airplanes, right? So that we get off the ground. Then this guy goes up in a weather balloon type thing, goes up there 30,000 feet, or no, it was 50,000 feet, I think it was, and looked down and said, he described the Earth as a flat disk. Then a few years later, the Russians got to 62,304 feet, and they looked down and said they didn't find any evidence of curvature whatsoever. Okay, first people to get up into the stratosphere. Now you got people, and you may have even said this yourself, they're saying you can see the curve at the beach. Or you can see the curve at a commercial airline that gets to, 35,000 feet. Yet these guys are shooting up 50 and 60,000 feet and reporting we don't see any curvature. Then you go a little bit further into the 1940s and you see stuff like this. We go forward about a decade to the 1940s, 1948. This is an official CIA, look up here, CIA.gov, okay? CIA declassified document from the Russians. I'm going to pull it up here in Adobe Acrobat. It's a little easier because I've already highlighted some stuff here, same document. All right, so the subject is Earth measurements, 1948, Moscow, Russia. Outer gravitational field and shape of the physical surface of the Earth. They're trying to figure out the shape of the Earth? Wait a minute. I thought we knew the shape of the Earth since Pythagoras and Eratosthenes, right? Well, apparently the Russians didn't get the memo. A study is made of the coordinates necessary for the solvability and uniqueness of solution of an integral equation by the aid of which the outer gravitational field and the shape of the physical surface of the Earth may be determined. So we go through this document a little bit here. It says the methods of studying the shape of the Earth, so this is what their goal is here. They're outlining some of that. The shape of the physical surface of the Earth can be determined with sufficient reliability on the basis only of data obtained from exact measurements. Well, that goes without saying, I suppose. And let's keep going down here. Let's see. We can regard the potential of the real Earth, by this equation here apparently, as known correct to an additive constant at all points of the physical surface of the Earth and only on the surface, whereas it is not determinable at all other points of space without knowledge of the shape of the Earth. So they're still trying to figure out the shape of the Earth here. But since the shape of the Earth is not known, 1948, the true coordinates of these points, B, L, and H, are unknown to us. So the Russians are having trouble figuring out the shape of the Earth in 1948. Let's look at another document here. Another declassified CIA document up here, right? They're checking out the firmament in this one. Let's go back to Acrobat. 1953 now. Geophysics light scattering, USSR. Trying to figure out how does light work in the atmosphere here. So we get down to page 19 here. It says dissertations defended in the Scientific Council of the Institute of Physics of the Earth, Institute of Physics of the Atmosphere, and Institute of Applied Geophysics, USSR, 1957. March 1957. Looks like March 23, 1957, apparently. The dissertation represents the result of many years of study of the clear daytime sky. The observations were carried out in 12 locations at various altitudes above the sea, various climatic, meteorological, and synoptic conditions. The observations were carried out mainly during high transparency of the atmosphere in the visual range of the spectrum in the absence of a snow cover. In the investigations, 2 instruments designed by V.G. Fezenkov were used. One of these was a visual photometer of the daytime sky intended for measuring the brightness of the firmament. Interesting. Trying to figure out the brightness of the firmament. Again, 1957. The dissertation contains a certain formula of the brightness of the sky, taking into consideration only the brightness of the first order, and derived, get this now, on the assumption of a flat Earth, and giving some conclusions derived on the basis of this formula. So the Russians are trying to check out the firmament based on assumptions of a flat Earth in 1957? Very interesting, huh? All right, then meanwhile, in the United States, we have this character right here, Admiral Byrd. He Antarctica and Project Fishbowl. This guy is a highly decorated guy. I'm not going to go through all that. Got many medals of honor and stuff like that. Amazing. He goes to the North Pole and claims to have found an entrance to inner Earth. And you ever dive into hollow Earth theory and all that stuff? Look into what he did in 1926. That's an interesting rabbit hole. After World War II, the nations, especially Germany, Russia, and the United States, become obsessed with Antarctica. 1946 and 1947, Admiral Byrd leads Operation High Jump. Why do they call it that? Because when you get to Antarctica, you're going to see an ice wall that's 200 to 300 feet tall. You got to get over that. Then you have 1955, 1956, Admiral Byrd leads Operation Deep Freeze. Everything changes after that. Almost immediately after the nations form the Antarctic Treaty, the United States and Russia start launching nukes into the sky, and NASA and DARPA are formed. I'm going to skip past the next video. You've probably seen it anyway, but talking about Operation Fishbowl, that was part of Project Dominic, and the name Dominic means of the Lord. So we literally called our mission, blowing up stuff in the sky, Operation Fishbowl of the Lord. Right? Now, if you're trying to avoid a conspiracy, you're not helping with the names here, folks. It really does have the appearance that, there was all this great breakthroughs in science and all kinds of stuff happening through the 20s, 30s. You get into the 40s, they're trying to figure out the firmament, the shape of the earth, all this stuff. You get to the 50s, everybody goes to Antarctica, and it seems to me they found something. And immediately they all pull out, they say, we need a treaty. They all create the international treaty that when has all the nations of the world agreed on anything, right? And yet there's so many nations that are in 100% agreement on this Antarctic thing. And then we create DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, all the black budget stuff, right? Super soldier stuff and all that. We create DARPA and NASA. And then the first thing that happens, a few things happen. The United States and Russia engage in a dig race. They start digging down as far as they can. And as I think Joshua mentioned, we've only been 8 miles down. Yeah, how many of you have seen in your textbooks all these pretty diagrams right down to the core of the earth? We know everything, the mantle, the blah, 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 all these different things. They've got these pretty artist pictures of every part of our earth right down to the core. Have you guys seen those pictures? We've only been down 8 miles. Not only do they have that for Earth, but they have it for the moon, for Mars, for all the planets, right? How ridiculous is that? We don't know anything. But the United States and Russia immediately did a dig race. They did a missile race. We're launching high-altitude nukes into the sky. And then we have the space race. All indications are, when you just step back and look at it, it has all the indications of people realizing we're in a cage. And they're trying to test the boundaries. How deep is this thing? How wide is this thing? How high is this thing? Let's figure it out. Right? All of the activity from the United States or Russia especially has all the exact indications you would expect of somebody just realizing they're in a cage. So we'll skip past that video where I kind of cover all that. So what have we learned so far? Kind of winding down here. They've lied to us about our origins. They've lied to us about our history. They've lied to us about our political system. They've lied to us about JFK, the moon landings, and 9/11. They've lied to us about gravity, fuel, and energy. They've intentionally dumbed us all down. They've lied to us about nutrition and healthcare. They've drugged us all out of our minds for profit. They constantly get us to kill each other in unconstitutional wars. They've convinced us that they are the good guys and must be trusted. They've told us God and the Bible are not true, nor to be trusted for truth. They made science, falsely so-called, into a God. They've convinced us we are nothing floating on a dust ball in space. And they've convinced us aliens are our creators, and oh, by the way, they're coming back. So with all this in mind, is it really a conspiracy? I don't think so. Compartmentalization alone answers a lot of this issue. Does a private know what the general knows? No, of course not. Does a mechanic know what the king knows? No, of course not. Look into the Manhattan Project. Look at how many people were involved with that and how much money was spent on it. The vice president of the United States didn't even know what was going on. The guy in the office right next to you didn't know what you were doing, and you didn't know what he was doing. Yeah, compartmentalization works. Again, the mechanic doesn't know what the king knows. If you really want to dive deep into how various nations could, be in on it, I recommend you check out these books right here. Conspirators, Hierarchy, the story of the Committee of the 300, of course, William Cooper's book, Behold, a Pale Horse. Learn about organizations like the Illuminati, Freemasons, Vatican, Jesuits, Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg meetings, Bohemian Grove, Committee of 300, Council of 13, and this is all just the tip of a very big iceberg of control. You understand how easy it would be to deceive us, and everybody would not have to be in on it. You start looking at people, well, I've got a cousin, I got a friend, or I got somebody, a family member, or whatever, that works at NASA. Oh, congratulations, you know somebody who builds stuff. Wow, awesome. Oh, you got somebody who looks at data on a computer screen. Wow, awesome. How many people have actually been in the space? All you know is you built something that got loaded on that thing that got shot up and did this. If you do a time lapse of it. You don't know anything. Yeah, you trust your friend or family member wouldn't have to be in on anything. How many of you know they lose contact of their stuff over the Indian Ocean today? Even now, they lose contact. That's the perfect opportunity in my mind for them to switch something to feed data to the monitor. You had Gene Kranz. Jaron did a video just recently quoting from Gene Kranz. You know the guy, Gene Kranz, who was like the head of operations at NASA during like Apollo? He was, Ed Harris played him in the Apollo 13 movie. He is quoted as saying, our simulations were so good that the operators would never be able to tell the difference between real world and simulation. That's how good their simulations were. So even today, 2019, they shoot something up there, they lose contact with this thing over the Indian Ocean. That's a perfect opportunity for them to switch whatever they do, and the data appears on the screen, and the person reading the data wouldn't have to be in on anything. He's just reading what's on his screen. Their simulations are so good, you wouldn't know the difference between real world and simulation. Keep that in mind. What government's trustworthy? Is our government trustworthy? Are the Russians trustworthy? Chinese? Israel. Israel's trustworthy, right? Whatever. Governments are full of conspiracies. The military answers to its government. When you think about, there's only been about 550-something people, I think, that have allegedly been to space. And, over half of them are from the United States, and about 216 of the 375 U.S. astronauts served in the military. I served in the military. How many of you know military, from the private right up to the general, are trained to keep secrets? Guess what? You get captured, you get to give everything away to the enemy? No, you're trained to keep secrets. You're trained, don't ask questions, you get paid to ask questions, right? Do what you're told. Trust your government. Swear to uphold what they tell you to do, right? When you're completely brainwashed through trauma-based mind control at boot camp. And when I was in that paradigm, I was Joe Patriot. I would have done anything they told me to do. And I look at the astronauts a lot like that right now. That, think about what was going on at that time in the 60s. If they told these guys, probably good, maybe in some cases possibly godly, but patriotic men, hey, listen, your country needs you to do this. Okay? They would have done it. But is it also a coincidence that MK Ultra, the government-sponsored mind control program, ran from 1953 to 1973? The space program, 1958 to 1972. Probably a coincidence. Space programs answer to their government. All nations who signed the Antarctic Treaty are suspect in my mind. Secret societies, guess what? They keep secrets. Amazing. You had Francis Edwin Webb, a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, was the administrator for NASA for the majority of the 1960s. Kenneth S. Klinknick, the overall manager of the Apollo program, was a 33rd degree Freemason. His brother, C. Fred Klinknick, was a 33rd Sovereign Grand Commander, the Supreme Council 33. The Mother Council of the World, incidentally, Southern Jurisdiction, USA, Washington. Many other notable NASA astronauts, not all of them, but many of them, were also Masons or had Masonic ties. So if we're dealing with a massive conspiracy, the Freemasons certainly had no shortage of insiders, including the astronauts themselves, to help achieve it. It actually only requires very few gatekeepers to keep the masses in the dark. I'll skip this video right here. What's the motivation? Well, this billboard kind of says it all. In science we trust, freedom from religion foundation. Now, to be fair, I'm against religion myself. I can't stand religion. I'm all about relationship with the Creator. Religion causes problems. But they're saying freedom from God. That's what they mean right there. But all they've done is create their own religion. And they have their own prophets, the prophets of scientism. So, in my opinion, what is the motivation? Why would they lie about all this? Well, it's my opinion. First, get people to doubt Yahuwah's word by destroying the very foundation of our Bible, Genesis, specifically the creation account. How many of you know everything about modern science and everything that comes out of NASA is directly contradictory to the Genesis account? In every way. Set up a new paradigm where God is out and science is in. Evolution removes Yahuwah from the equation. When evolution finally runs its course, it becomes utterly bankrupt, which it is right now. Introduce the idea of intelligent design, but deny the designer his true credit and place it rather on ancient aliens. Then promote the ancient aliens theme as much as possible in all forms of media by perpetuating the concept of Earth as a tiny blue marble orbiting an average sun in an average galaxy among trillions of other galaxies in an ever-expanding universe. With so much quote-unquote potential for life to exist in such a vast expanse, the idea of alien scientists being our creators seems a lot more plausible over time and heavy indoctrination. And finally, the stage is set for our alien creators to return and bestow upon us their miracles, signs, and wonders in order to convince us all the more that all religions are false. And then we put our trust in them. Finally, when Christ does return, we are all convinced that he is the enemy and our united world gathers together to make war with him. That's Revelation 19:19. That's what I see as the motivation, and it's powered by the influence of media. Everything in media. It's like they've trained us that we're monkeys. Why? So that we can play the monkey see, monkey do mentality. They can show us something and we just believe it. I'm going to show you something right here. Check this out. I don't know if you've seen this. Do you ever see the time when they launched all 5 space shuttles at the same time? Isn't this incredible? All 5 space shuttles were launched at the same time. How cool is that? Look at all these people right there, right in the smoke from the takeoff. They're videotaping with their iPhones and stuff. Check this out. Look at this guy. He's still on the catwalk. Look at these kids playing right underneath there. That's awesome. You see the kids playing in the fire? That's so cool. I saw it on TV. Look at this. It's amazing. They had all these cruise ships out there checking it out too. That was quite a sight to see, huh? And the best part's coming up. These guys had front row seats. That right there is pretty awesome. And then, forget about the Tesla, forget about Elon Musk. Look what these guys got to do. Ooh. Look at that. That's the best cruise right there, huh? Looks very real, doesn't it? That's how easy it is to fool us. Saw it on TV, must be true, in the media. Have many of you ever heard of the 7 Mountain Prophecy? Anybody ever hear of this? A couple of individuals pretty big in the Christian world, Francis Schaeffer, Lauren Cunningham, Bill Bright. They came up with an idea, they believe, that was given to them by God. They all had separate visions on how to reach the world with the gospel message. And when they came together and told each other, what they felt that God was telling them, they realized that they had each been given separate components of a bigger vision, which eventually became morphed into what became known as the 7 Mountain Prophecy. And if you can't read it, these are what they call the 7 mountains or spheres of influence. They have a radical impact on our culture, and that's religion, family, education, media, arts and entertainment, government, and business. Clearly, if you think about those things, they all have a massive influence on the way we think and the way cultures are affected. And what impacted me as I looked at that is the mountains of media, arts, and entertainment have a tremendous influence over the other ones. They influence all the other mountains. Why do you think it is that all of the media that we look at, now over 90% of it, is owned and run by 6, what I would say is Luciferian-run corporations that control everything? Everything you hear, everything you see in the media, and everything like that. There's a way we can fight back. I suggest that take a look at what Alex Kendrick said. He's a Christian filmmaker. He said, I found a Barna Group survey that basically said the top 3 most influential factors in our culture were movies, television, and the internet. The church wasn't even in the top 10. This is echoing something that George Lucas had said prior. He said, the influence of the church, which used to be all-powerful, has been usurped by film. They get it. That's a true statement right there. The enemy gets it. The people on the other side get it. Everything you're watching in TV is all about panspermia, ancient aliens. Aliens are coming back over and over and over again. Earth, globe, Universal Studios, globe. All this is in your face all the time, all the time. We have YouTube channels. We're being censored like crazy. Right? I've got 197,000 subscribers. Most of my videos cap out at about 16,000 views. They're squashing it. There's maybe 200 people here. That's great, 200 people. That's awesome. We are not reaching the world. That's why I'm so passionate about trying to get this project off the ground, Seed. What is this all about? I'm basically trying to take everything that we've been talking about here at this conference, everything that I've personally researched over the last decade, and the information that other people that I like to read their research, take all that same stuff and do the same thing they've done. Wrap it all up in cool science fiction and put it out there in a project that I called Seed. Why? Because I'm seeding you with information that over time can be watered and produce the same type of harvest that they have used against us with all of their media and all of their movies and everything like that. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Whew. Went a little long. Sorry about that.